Good evening and welcome to the Sleep to Law series. Tonight we'll talk about Under the Dome, the massive saga where an invisible, impenetrable barrier descends upon the small town of Chester's Mill, cutting them off from the rest of the world in an instant. If you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe and comment below. As a new channel, every member who joins is helping to build this library of lore from the ground up. If you want to support these deep dives, click the join button below. Before we begin, I have a question for you. If you were trapped in your town with no electricity and limited supplies, what would be the first thing you'd do? Let me know in the comments. Now let us step into the isolation of Chester's Mill. The day the sky turned solid. It began on a crisp October morning in Maine, the kind of day that feels deceptively innocent, painted in the vibrant oranges and reds of autumn. From 2,000 feet in the air, the town of Chester's Mill looked like a pristine model set, a place where nothing truly terrible could ever happen. Inside a Seneca 5 aircraft, Claudette Sanders was learning the joy of flight, exhilarated by the perspective, unaware that she and her instructor, Chuck Thompson, were racing toward an invisible termination point. There is a profound arrogance in the human assumption that the sky is open territory, a boundless expanse of freedom. But on this day, physics and reality were about to conspire against that assumption. Simultaneously on the ground below, a woodchuck waddled along Route 119. It was driven only by simple instinct, seeking food, oblivious to the concept of boundaries. It paused, sensing a human presence, and decided to move just a few more feet. It is a grim cosmic joke that the high-flying machine and the lowly animal would share the exact same fate at the exact same second. There was no warning, no shimmer in the air, no electrical hum. There was only the sudden, absolute end of forward motion. The woodchuck was instantly bisected, sliced cleanly by an unseen force. Above it, the airplane met the same unyielding geometry. It didn't just crash, it ceased to exist in its previous form, crumpling against a wall of nothingness. The fuel ignited, creating a blooming flower of fire. An American disaster rose, hanging suspended in the sky before raining debris and body parts onto the highway. Dale Barbara, known as Barbie, was walking that highway. He was a man trying to leave his past behind, specifically a brutal beating he'd taken in a local parking lot. He was a drifter, a rambling guy seeking the open road, perhaps heading for the big sky of the West. There is a distinct psychological cruelty in the timing here. Barbie was moments away from escaping Chester's Mill forever. He had even tried to hitch a ride with a girl in a pickup, but she had passed him by. Had she stopped, he would have been outside the trap. Instead, fate left him standing on the pavement to witness the impossible. He saw the woodchuck split. He saw the plane dissolve. He watched a severed leg land on the road, a grotesque introduction to a new reality where the rules of the world had been rewritten in an instant. While the sky was raining fire on the edge of town, a different kind of violence was erupting in the heart of the village. Junior Rennie, the son of a powerful local selectman, was fighting a war inside his own skull. He suffered from catastrophic migraines, pain so intense he visualized it as black spiders or an anthill in his brain. But Junior's pathology went deeper than physical pain. He was a powder keg of entitled rage. He went to the home of Angie McCain, his ex-girlfriend, ostensibly to talk, but really to punish. The psychology of Junior Rennie is a study in misplaced blame. As the pain in his head blinded him, he projected that agony onto Angie. When she opened the door, expecting a reconciliation with someone else, Junior's control snapped. What followed was a brutal, manic descent into murder. He didn't just strike her, he dismantled her, slamming her into the furniture of her own kitchen, the domestic setting contrasting hideously with the savagery of the act. As Angie seized and died, the town whistle began to blow, triggered by the power grid's reaction to the crash outside of town. To Junior, in his delirious state, it must have sounded like the world screaming in judgment, yet the chaos outside provided the perfect cover for the darkness inside the house. He fled to the damp shadows under the Peace Bridge, a killer hiding in a place named for tranquility, while the town mobilized for a disaster they didn't yet understand. The phenomenon was not limited to the highway. The barrier, which would come to be known as the Dome, had descended like a cookie cutter around the entire perimeter of the town. It was an act of precise, impartial severance. In a potato field, a farmer named Bob Rue was listening to music on his tractor, blissfully unaware that his machine was about to drive him into a wall that wasn't there. He died instantly. In a backyard garden on the town line, Myra Evans reached for a squash. It was a mundane, nurturing act, harvesting food for her family. But her hand crossed the line and the Dome took it. She bled to death on her kitchen floor while her husband, Jack, watched in helpless, horrific confusion, unable to dial 911 because the lines were dead. The barrier had severed not just limbs and metal, but communication itself. Back on Route 119, the scope of the catastrophe was escalating. Barbie had been joined by an older man, a local with a broken nose sustained when he ran face first into the invisible wall. Together, they stared at the sky. There was a smear in the air, a smudge where the plane had hit, like grease on a window pane. This visual anomaly defied all logic. It suggested that the air itself had become solid. Then came the pulp truck. If the plane crash was the initial shock, the pulp truck was the confirmation of the trap. The driver, speeding and hauling an overloaded cargo of logs, had no chance to stop. The physics of the impact were terrifying. The truck hit the barrier at 60 miles an hour and simply disintegrated. The momentum carried the massive logs forward, but the invisible wall reflected them back with terrifying force, turning them into giant missiles that rained down on the observers. The explosion of the fuel tanks created a wall of heat, a hellscape on the highway. In the aftermath of this second explosion, amidst the burning wreckage and the confusion of gathering crowds, the true nature of their confinement became undeniable. Barbie and his companion approached the line. They could feel a static charge, a prickling of the skin that raised the hairs on their arms. It was a sensory warning, a biological reaction to an unnatural presence. Barbie reached out. His hand met resistance where there should have been empty air. It felt solid, unyielding, cool to the touch. When he pulled his hand back, he saw blood from his own nose beading on the invisible surface, hanging in space like red dew on a pane of glass. It was a moment of profound existential dread. They weren't just blocked, they were encased. The realization washed over Barbie, the former soldier. This wasn't a weather event. It wasn't a simple accident. It was a deployment. As the fire roared and the townspeople gawked in shock, Barbie understood that the local authorities were woefully out of their depth. He turned to the retired grocery manager beside him and gave the first order of the new world. Call the Air National Guard. They needed a no-fly zone immediately, because Chester's Mill had just become the most dangerous place on Earth. The trap was shut. The air was solid, and the nightmare under the dome had begun. The invisible guillotine. The horror in Chester's Mill. The invisible guillotine. The horror in Chester's Mill didn't begin with a scream, but with the mundane rustle of autumn leaves. Duke Perkins, the aging chief of police, stood on his lawn, a man defined by the quiet erosion of time. At 67, his hearing was fading, a physiological metaphor for a town leader perhaps losing touch with the shifting currents of his community. He missed the initial explosions, his world narrowed to the sacred music playing from his wife's radio. There is a profound tragedy in how ordinary these final moments are. We often imagine catastrophe announces itself with fanfare, but for Duke, it creeps in behind the facade of a lazy Saturday. His wife Brenda serves as the anchor to his humanity, her playful nagging about his pacemaker acting as unwitting foreshadowing. A Chekhov's gun planted in the very chest of the protagonist, ticking down to a grim inevitability. While the chief stood amidst his leaves, a more visceral and violent drama played out on Route 117. We witness the disintegration of a marriage between Billy and Wanda DeBeck. Their final conversation, a toxic loop of petty grievances. Stephen King often uses this juxtaposition, the banality of human conflict interrupting the calm of nature, to heighten the shock of what follows. They are arguing about beer cans and in-laws when they slam into the impossible. The barrier doesn't care about their domestic squabbles. It is an absolute, unyielding force of physics. The resulting crash is described with clinical brutality. The invisible wall acts as a transparent guillotine, turning a moving vehicle into a crushed accordion of steel and flesh. The aftermath introduces us to the bystanders, the chorus of this tragedy. Two elderly friends, Nora and Elsa, stumble upon the wreckage. Their reaction is one of instinctual altruism, yet the barrier claims Nora just as swiftly as it did the DeBecks. It's a stark reminder of the dome's indifference. It does not discriminate between the drunk driver and the good Samaritan. When Nora breaks her neck against nothing but air, the psychological break for the survivor, Elsa, is total. The mind simply cannot process a wall that the eye cannot see. Enter Dale Barbara, known as Barbie. He represents the outsider, the drifter with a moral compass, contrasting sharply with the town's entrenched rot. Teaming up with Paul Gendron, they begin to map the perimeter of this anomaly. The horror here shifts from vehicular manslaughter to ecological nightmare. They find a lot of dead birds, severed in flight. Nature, usually fluid and adaptable, has been halved. The imagery of the stream is particularly haunting, water piling up as if trapped in a clear plastic bag. It suggests that the town hasn't just been walled off. It has been hermetically sealed, preserved like a specimen in a jar. While Barbie explores the physical boundaries, we cut to the psychological rot at the town's core. Junior Rennie. Suffering from a migraine and a guilty conscience, Junior hides under his covers, a child in a man's body, terrified of the consequences of his own violence. His headache mirrors the pressure building in the town, a physical manifestation of the impending chaos. But the true antagonist is not the supernatural barrier, it is the opportunistic sociopathy of Big Jim Rennie. Arriving at the crash site on Route 119, Rennie drives a Hummer, a symbol of his excessive armored ego. He immediately attempts to control the narrative. When Ernie Calvert manages a miraculous connection to Homeland Security, Rennie hangs up the phone. This is a crucial character beat. Rennie values his own authority over the town's survival. He refers to the disaster as a cluster mug, a sanitized term that belies the blood on the pavement. He views the catastrophe through the lens of the protectability quotient, calculating how to leverage the disaster to consolidate power while avoiding blame. In Rennie's mind, the dome isn't a prison. It's a kingdom where he is finally the undisputed monarch. The tension escalates as the sheer scope of the entrapment becomes clear. A news helicopter, seeking the sensational scoop of the crash, banks for a better view and collides with the barrier. The explosion rains fire down on the outside world, a tantalizing glimpse of a freedom that is now lethal to touch. The barrier is now visible not just by touch, but by the destruction it wreaks. The inevitable confrontation between the lawful good of Duke Perkins and the lawful evil of Big Jim Rennie takes place on this bloodied stage. Duke, despite his age and failing health, exerts command, physically moving Rennie out of the crime scene. It is a momentary victory for order, but the dome has a final cruel twist for the chief. As Duke investigates the perimeter, he touches the barrier. The mysterious energy coursing through the wall reacts violently with the electronics in his chest. The explosion of his pacemaker is not just a gruesome death. It is the symbolic destruction of the old guard. The heart of the town's law enforcement literally bursts, leaving a power vacuum that Big Jim Rennie is all too eager to fill. Meanwhile, the local medical response, led by Rusty Everett and the ambulance driver, Twitch, highlights the confusion on the ground. They are racing toward rumors of death, witnessing the helicopter crash with a mixture of awe and horror. Their banter is a defense mechanism, a way to keep the sanity-shattering reality at bay. Barbie, now separated from Gendron, confirms the absolute nature of their imprisonment at the Tarker's Mills line. A delivery truck lies overturned, its cargo of snack cakes spilling onto the road, another absurd, mundane detail amidst the carnage. The realization settles in. There are no gaps. The circle is closed. Chester's Mill has been cut out of the world, leaving its inhabitants trapped with a power-hungry tyrant and a mysterious force that punishes any attempt to leave. The dead birds were just the warning. Now, the humans are the ones in the cage. The fishbowl of Chester's Mill. The psychological weight of a disaster often hits not with a bang, but with a surreal, muffled silence. This is the atmosphere Dale Barbara, known simply as Barbie, steps into as he walks back down Route 119. It is 6 o'clock in the evening, and the town of Chester's Mill has begun to transform. The streets are largely deserted, yet the air vibrates with the mechanical roar of generators, a chorus of engines replacing the usual hum of small-town life. When Barbie arrives at Sweetbriar Rose, the local diner, the scene inside serves as a microcosm for the town's collective shock. The usual banter about the Red Sox or local politics has evaporated, replaced by a heavy, anxious fixation on the television screen. Anderson Cooper is on CNN, standing just outside the town limits, broadcasting in front of a wrecked pulp truck. The barrier, this invisible, impermeable wall that has descended upon them, is already attracting the national media and the military. The patrons of the diner watch with that peculiar dissociation that victims of trauma often experience, seeing their own reality reflected back to them through the sanitized lens of a news camera makes it feel like a movie, not their lives. Inside the kitchen, the tension manifests in absence. Angie McCain and Dodie Sanders, two regulars of the staff, are missing. This forces Barbie back into the role of cook, a role he was trying to leave behind. He dons an apron, stepping back into the rhythm of the grill to feed a dining room paralyzed by uncertainty. It is here that we see the first true psychological divide in the town, the difference between those who watch and those who act. Barbie and Rose Twitchell, the diner's owner, are doers. As the night deepens and the diner empties, the reality of the siege sets in. The town common is filled with people staring at the perimeter, where the US Army has set up floodlights, turning the night into an artificial day. It's a dead zone in the most literal sense. Inside the darkened diner, lit only by the kitchen's emergency glow, Barbie and Rose confront the mathematics of survival. This is a crucial moment in the narrative where the genre shifts from mystery to survival horror. They aren't discussing aliens or conspiracies, they are discussing propane. Barbie, drawing on his military experience in Iraq and the pragmatic philosophy of Chairman Mao, realizes they must wish for sunshine, but build dikes. They calculate burn rates and tank capacities. If they ration, they can keep the diner running for a month. It is a grim estimation that acknowledges a terrifying possibility. The government isn't going to save them anytime soon. They are shifting from a service economy to a survival economy in the blink of an eye. The lights are dimmed, the thermostat lowered. The tightening of the belt begins now. But while Barbie prepares to sustain life, elsewhere in the town, a life has been extinguished. Junior Rennie, the son of the second selectman, stands in his bedroom, listening to the silence of his house. Junior is a complex study in pathology. He suffers from splitting headaches and violent impulses that he barely understands. He has just murdered Angie McCain. The psychological dissonance within him is staggering. He wonders if it was just a dream, a defense mechanism his brain constructs to shield him from the horror of his own actions. But the blood on his clothes is real. In a scene that highlights the banal evil often present in King's works, Junior tends to his laundry. He remembers his mother's advice about using cold water for bloodstains, a domestic tip perverted to cover up a homicide. As the washing machine churns, washing away the evidence, Junior's mind clears. The headache fades. He feels a strange sense of clarity, a dangerous calmness that often follows a psychotic break. He decides to return to the scene of the crime, not out of remorse but out of self-preservation. He needs to check for the police forensics van. Before leaving, Junior raids his father's safe. Big Jim Rennie, a used car salesman and town selectman, keeps a hoard of cash and bearer bonds hidden away, evidence of corruption that long predates the dome. Junior steals a handful of money, justifying it with his father's own twisted theology: the Lord helps those who help themselves. It is a dark reflection of the town's leadership. The corruption of the father has trickled down to become the sociopathy of the son. Junior creeps through the darkened streets to the McCain house. It is empty, save for the body. The silence is heavy, magnified by the power outage. He drags Angie's body into the pantry, organizing the chaos of his violence with the meticulousness of a demon housekeeper. He is scrubbing the blood from the floor when a knock comes at the door. Fate, it seems, is cruel in Chester's Mill. Dodie Sanders, high on marijuana and grief-stricken over the death of her mother, who piloted the plane that crashed into the dome earlier that day, stumbles into the house. She is looking for her best friend, Angie. She is looking for comfort. Instead, she finds a predator. Dodie's perspective is tragic. She feels as though she has stepped into a parallel dimension, a science fiction movie where nothing makes sense. She calls out for Angie in the dark, her senses dulled by drugs and shock. When a figure emerges from the kitchen, she rushes toward it, expecting an embrace. Junior Rennie opens his arms, but not to comfort. He strangles her. In the span of a few hours, the dome has not only trapped the town but has created a pressure cooker where Junior's madness can flourish unchecked. While Junior descends into violence, his father, Big Jim Rennie, is consolidating power. We find him at the funeral home, comforting Andy Sanders. Andy is the first selectman, but he is a weak man, shattered by the loss of his wife Claudette. Big Jim's comfort is a masterclass in manipulation. He prays with Andy, invoking God's will, but his eyes are on the prize, total control of Chester's Mill. He uses Andy's grief to steer him, framing their upcoming power grab as a duty to the good of the town. It is the classic authoritarian playbook. Utilize a crisis to suspend normalcy and seize authority. They move to the town hall for an emergency meeting. The group assembled is a puppet government: the grieving Andy, the drug-addled Andrea Grinnell, and the nervous, out-of-his-depth acting police chief, Peter Randolph. Big Jim dominates the room. He proposes keeping the town dry, shutting down alcohol sales to prevent riots, but more importantly, to impose control. He speaks of keeping things business as usual to prevent panic, while simultaneously hoarding information and resources. The most chilling moment of this political maneuvering comes when the generator at the town hall fails, plunging them into darkness. It's a literal and metaphorical foreshadowing of the town's bleak future. In the dim light of emergency backups, Big Jim pushes through his most dangerous agenda item: the expansion of the police force. With the actual chief of police dead and several officers stuck outside the dome, the force is depleted. Big Jim proposes deputizing his son, Junior, and Junior's friends, a group of young men known for their aggression and lack of discipline. Andrea Grinnell, despite her haze of prescription painkillers, vaguely recalls that these boys were involved in a violent altercation recently, but Big Jim steamrolls her objections, rewriting history to paint them as upstanding citizens. The vote passes. The wolves are now guarding the sheep. Meanwhile, Julia Shumway, the editor of the local newspaper, The Democrat, represents the town's intellect and conscience. She is wrestling with guilt for leaving Dodie Sanders alone, unaware of the girl's terrible fate. Julia is determined to keep the news flowing even if she has to Xerox the paper herself. Her skepticism is her shield. When she receives a call from a Colonel Cox on her cell phone, which surprisingly works for this specific incoming call, she doesn't cower. The conversation with Colonel Cox reveals that the outside world knows far more than they are sharing. He refers to the barrier as the Dome, a specific and terrifying label. He warns her about the interference near the perimeter that causes electronics to explode, a technological anomaly that suggests this is no standard military blockade. Cox tasks Julia with finding Barbie, bridging the gap between the military outsider and the town's most capable resident. This alliance between the cynical journalist and the pragmatic drifter establishes the core resistance against the encroaching darkness of Big Jim's regime. The narrative threads converge as the night ends. Julia finds Barbie at his apartment delivering the message from the Colonel. But the true climax of this sequence occurs on the steps of the Rennie house. Junior Rennie sits waiting for his father. The murders are done, the bodies are hidden. He is armed, paranoid, and balancing on a razor's edge of suicide or further violence. When Big Jim arrives, the interaction is not one of confrontation, but of perverse validation. Big Jim, unaware of his son's horrific crimes, offers him a badge. He asks Junior to step up, to become a deputy to help maintain order. For Junior, this is the ultimate affirmation. His hallucinations, his violence, his stolen money, it all fades before the approval of his father. He puts the gun away. He isn't a killer on the run anymore, he is the law. "If you need us, we are there," Junior says, sealing the town's fate. As he kisses his father's cheek, the tragedy of Chester's Mill is fully established. The Dome has trapped them all, but the monsters are already inside, and they have just been given the keys to the city, the invisible prison. The night sky over western Maine is usually a sprawling cataract of starlight, a display of cosmic energy that requires no man-made generator to fuel it. But on this particular Saturday night in Chester's Mill, the stars are competing with the harsh, artificial glare of a military quarantine. As we delve into the opening hours of the crisis in Stephen King's Under the Dome, we find Dale Barbie Barbara and journalist Julia Shumway driving toward the edge of town, navigating a landscape that has suddenly transformed from a sleepy rural community into a high-stakes psychological pressure cooker. There is a profound sense of isolation here, not just physical, but social. As they approach the town limits near the WCIK radio tower, they encounter a blockade. It's not merely a roadblock, it is a manifestation of the government's sudden, terrified secrecy. The soldiers stationed there, Marines, distinct from the army brass running the logistics, stand with their backs turned. This body language is a powerful symbol of the situation. The world has literally turned its back on Chester's Mill. When Barbie, a former lieutenant himself, tries to engage them with military camaraderie, he is met with stone silence and the rigid obedience of men following orders they don't understand. The barrier itself is visible only by the way it catches the light, a spray-painted line on the air, marking the boundary between the known world and the new, terrifying reality of the Dome. The true nature of this anomaly begins to take shape during a tense phone call between Barbie and his former commanding officer, Colonel Cox. The revelation is chilling in its specificity. This isn't a standard dome. It is a force field that conforms exactly to the town's legal borders, a detail that suggests intelligent design rather than a natural phenomenon. It reaches up to 47,000 feet and plunges deep into the earth, severing the water table and even the tectonic plates. We see here the shift from a survival story to a technological mystery. The military believes this field is being generated from the inside. This is a crucial psychological turning point for the characters. They aren't just victims of an external accident. They are potentially locked in a cage with the device and the person responsible for their imprisonment. The hunt for this hypothetical generator becomes the new prime directive. However, the human element complicates everything. Julia Shumway, displaying the protective instinct that will define the town's resistance, decides to withhold the information about the generator from the general public. She realizes that if the townsfolk know there is a device to be found, panic will ensue. But more dangerously, she suspects that if a machine is running this field, a human hand must be guiding it. This introduces a paranoid tension that overlays the physical threat. The enemy is among them. While the secular world scrambles for scientific answers, the spiritual world of Chester's Mill is fracturing. We see two distinct reactions to the trauma, representing the dichotomy of faith in the face of the inexplicable. On one side is the Reverend Piper Libby. She stands in the darkness of the Congregational Church, a woman who has lost her faith, but not her sense of duty. She prays to the great not there, a heartbreaking acknowledgement of the void she feels. Her response to the dome is one of weary resignation and a desire to simply be useful. Contrast this with the manic, terrifying energy of Lester Coggins at the Holy Redeemer Church. Coggins represents the danger of religious fundamentalism when subjected to extreme stress. Believing that his own sins, specifically his involvement in a laundering scheme with town selectman Big Jim Rennie, have brought this wrath down upon the town, he engages in brutal self-flagellation. Here, the law takes a darker, more supernatural turn. Coggins hears a voice. Whether this is a psychotic break induced by guilt or an actual communication from the entity controlling the dome is left ambiguous. But the command he receives is specific. Look for a blinded one who has gone mad. This suggests that the dome, or whatever force controls it, is playing a game with the inhabitants, using their guilt and madness as pawns on a chessboard. The corruption Coggins fears is confirmed in the quiet study of the recently deceased police chief, Howie Perkins. His widow Brenda, seeking comfort in his digital ghost, stumbles upon a hidden file labeled Vader, a clear reference to the town's heavy-breathing antagonist Big Jim Rennie. The files reveal that Rennie isn't just a power-hungry politician, he's running a massive crystal meth operation. The irony is palpable. The dome has trapped the criminals with their evidence. The external wall has solidified the internal rot. This discovery shifts the genre momentarily from sci-fi to noir. Even without the alien barrier, Chester's Mill was a town sitting on a powder keg of crime and secrets. Finally, the narrative moves to the domestic sphere, where the supernatural impact of the dome begins to bleed into the subconscious of the most vulnerable. Rusty Everett, the town's physician assistant, returns home to find his golden retriever Audrey acting strangely. Animals often serve as the canaries in the coal mine in King's Law, sensing shifts in the electromagnetic or psychic ether that humans ignore. The dog's distress prefigures a terrifying episode with Rusty's daughter Janelle. The child suffers a seizure, but it is not merely medical. In her trance state, she screams about the Great Pumpkin and the need to stop Halloween. While on the surface this sounds like the confused ramblings of a child, the psychological implication is far heavier. The human brain, especially the developing brain of a child, often interprets incomprehensible horror through the lens of familiar pop culture. Just as the ancients saw gods in the thunder, Janelle senses the immense alien presence of the dome, and her mind translates it into the scariest thing she knows, a Halloween monster. It is a moment of pure Lovecraftian dread, masked as a childhood nightmare. As the town sleeps under the invisible lid, the pieces are set. The military is helpless, the religious are fracturing, the corruption is festering, and the children are dreaming of monsters. The dome has not just sealed them in, it has begun to amplify the darkness that was already there. Madness, blindness, and the heart of the dome. In the immediate shadow of the dome, time seems to warp, compressing days into eras. We begin with the youth of Chester's Mill, specifically Joseph McClatchy, a 13-year-old intellect known as Scarecrow Joe. While the adults are paralyzed by the impossibility of the barrier, Joe is energized by the connectivity of the digital age. He embodies the resilience of a generation raised on the internet. To him, the dome is a firewall to be hacked, not a god to be feared. He spends the first night burning through bandwidth, sifting through conspiracy theories, ranging from alien experiments to military weapon testing. But Joe, with a maturity beyond his years, realizes the why matters less than the who, and the who is the government. He mobilizes his peers, the skater kids and geeks, to organize a protest. It is a spark of rebellion, a sign that the town's spirit hasn't been crushed yet, though they are woefully naive about the forces aligning against them. Simultaneously, we witness the terrifying ascension of Junior Rennie. Here is a study in psychological volatility. Suffering from crippling headaches and a sense of uselessness, Junior is suddenly handed a badge and a purpose by the newly appointed malleable police chief Randolph. The transformation is immediate and narcotic. The pain in his head vanishes, replaced by the intoxicating rush of authority. Alongside a crew of bullies and thugs, Junior is deputized. The mandate is dangerous in its simplicity: take no shit. For a young man with deep-seated rage issues and a desperate need for his father's approval, this is not a job offer. It is a license to hunt. The atmosphere in town shifts from confusion to an incipient police state almost instantly. The first casualty of this new order is Sam Verdreau, a harmless town drunk. When Sam tries to buy wine before legal selling hours, the situation escalates. Junior, high on his newfound power and the adrenaline of the crisis, brutalizes the old man. It's a grotesque display of dominance, slamming the frail man into a truck and humiliating him before a crowd. This isn't law enforcement, it's performance art for sociopaths. When Dale, Barbie Barbara, and journalist Julia Shumway intervene, they aren't just witnessing police brutality, they are seeing the first cracks of a fascist microcosm. Junior's reaction to Barbie, a mix of fear and megalomania, signals that old grudges are now backed by the full weight of the law. The badge on Junior's chest acts as a shield for his instability, validating his worst impulses. While the streets grow dangerous, the spiritual battle lines are drawn. The town's two churches offer conflicting salves for the panic. Piper Libby preaches love and endurance, viewing the dome as a test of community. In stark contrast, Reverend Lester Coggins preaches hellfire, interpreting the barrier as divine punishment for hidden sins. Coggins is a man tortured by his own complicity in the town's corruption, specifically his ties to Big Jim Rennie's illicit operations. His guilt manifests as fanaticism. He organizes a massive prayer meeting at the edge of the dome, desperate to drag the town's secrets into the light, believing that only confession can shatter the invisible wall. By early afternoon, a surreal tableau forms at Dinsmore's dairy field, right up against the barrier. It is a scene of cognitive dissonance that defines the human reaction to disaster. On one side, Scarecrow Joe's protesters march in a circle, demanding answers from the silent soldiers on the other side. On the other, Lester Coggins leads a weeping prayer circle, and in the middle, capitalizing on the chaos, is Romeo Burpee. He sets up a tent to sell old hot dogs and stale candy, turning the site of their imprisonment into a carnival. It is a profound commentary on normalcy bias. Even at the end of the world, commerce continues, and people will pay to pretend things are okay. They eat, they chant, they pray, all within inches of the force field that has cut them off from reality. But the manic energy of the carnival masks the approaching tragedy. Rory Dinsmore, a bright kid with a knack for mathematics but a deficit in wisdom, is doing chores nearby. He has been punished for touching the dome the day before, but the isolation of the barn gives his mind space to wander. Inspiration strikes him like a fever. He equates the dome to a balloon, something that can be popped if hit with enough concentrated force. It is the kind of dangerous logic that appeals to the young and desperate. He believes he can be the hero who liberates the town. Rory steals his father's high-powered rifle and an ATV. The sequence that follows is a masterclass in inevitable horror. He races across the field, the engines roar, cutting through the hymns and the protest chants. The soldiers on the outside see him coming and scramble away, knowing what the boy does not. The dome gives no quarter. Rory crashes the ATV but remains undeterred, fueled by the delusion of glory. He stands before the invisible wall, the crowd screaming for him to stop, his father running in futile desperation. The physics of the dome are absolute. When Rory pulls the trigger, he expects a breakthrough. Instead, he gets a rebuke from the laws of nature. The high-velocity bullet strikes the barrier and rebounds with perfect, malicious geometry. It doesn't just bounce, it returns to its sender. The fragment strikes Rory, destroying his eye and lodging in his brain. The transition from carnival joy to bloody horror is instantaneous. The boy's screams of "I'm blind" tear through the air, shattering the afternoon's fragile peace. For Lester Coggins, who rushes to cradle the maimed child, this is not an accident. It is a prophecy fulfilled. He recalls the scripture: madness, blindness, and astonishment of the heart. The blinding of the innocent child becomes the catalyst for the Reverend's final break with his former masters. He sees now that prayers are not enough. The dome is a mirror reflecting their sins back upon them, just as it reflected the bullet. The time for passive worship is over. The time for confrontation has begun. The dome has claimed its first tribute in blood, and the town of Chester's Mill realizes, with sinking dread, that they are trapped in a cage where the only way out is through the madness. The dome's first blood. The chaos following the shooting is a visceral study in confusion, a snapshot of a town rapidly losing its grip on sanity. In the immediate aftermath, memory becomes fragmented, unreliable for everyone except those trained to see through the fog of trauma. For Rusty Everett, the physician's assistant, the scene is a blur of panic, anchored only by the grotesque image of Pastor Coggins, shirtless and skeletal, a harbinger of the fragility that now defines their lives. But for Dale Barbara, the combat veteran, the world slows down. He sees the details that others miss, specifically the menacing body language of the newly deputized police force. He watches Melvin Searles, a thug with a badge, offer a hand gesture that promises future violence, a silent communication that the rules of civilization are being rewritten in real time. The tragedy centers on the Dinsmore boy, Rory. The horror of the scene is amplified by the sheer helplessness of his parents, Alden and Shelley. Their grief is primal, reducing Alden to an animalistic state, ready to strike out at anyone, even those trying to help. This is the first crack in the town's social contract. Pain overrides logic. When Barbie attempts to intervene, to act as a medic, the response from the new authority figures is immediate and brutal. He is assaulted by officers Searles and Wettington, not because he is a threat, but because he is an outsider, a convenient target for a police force that is already curdling into a gang. The badge on Searles's chest is no longer a symbol of protection. It has become a license for personal vendettas. Amidst the blood and the shouting, a chilling prophecy slips out. The dying boy, Rory, delirious from the bullet fragment in his brain, begins to hallucinate. He screams about Halloween and fire, a vision of doom that silences the mob. It is a moment of pure Stephen King horror, the innocent child acting as a conduit for a terrible future. The adults, particularly the town's de facto dictator Big Jim Rennie, pause to listen. It is a stark reminder that under the dome, time and causality are warping. The boy's seizure breaks the spell, but the dread lingers, heavier than the autumn air. The confrontation that follows illustrates the shifting power dynamics of Chester's Mill. When the police attempt to arrest Barbie on trumped-up charges of interference, it is Julia Shumway who steps in. She wields her camera like a weapon, bluffing the corrupt Chief Randolph and Big Jim with the threat of exposure. It is a desperate gamble, relying on the assumption that the laws of the outside world still matter. For now, the bluff works. Rennie, the shark in these waters, decides to wait. He retreats, not out of fear, but out of calculation. He understands that the isolation is young. There will be plenty of time to deal with nuisances like Barbie later. As the crowd disperses, the psychological toll on the town's youth becomes apparent. A group of teenagers, including Joe McClatchy and Norrie Calvert, watch the adults with a cynical clarity. They observe the police struggling to direct traffic, screaming insults, behaving with the aggression of frightened animals. The comparison to Lord of the Flies is inevitable and explicitly made. The veneer of society is thin, and the kids realize that the pigs are not just a derogatory slang for police, but an accurate description of the beast emerging within the men in uniform. The realization that the adults are just as scared and potentially more dangerous than the situation itself brings a profound loss of innocence. Norrie's tears are not just for the wounded boy, but for the death of the illusion of safety. Barbie and Julia's subsequent drive offers a brief respite from the physical violence, but introduces a new, existential threat. A phone call from Colonel Cox reveals the government's terrifying disconnection from the reality on the ground. Barbie is informed of his absurd promotion to colonel, a title he neither wants nor respects, and is ordered to take command of a town that has already rejected federal authority. The government views the dome as a tactical obstacle, planning a Big Bang, a bunker-buster missile strike, for the following day. They speak of acceptable risks and military protocols, completely failing to grasp the us-against-them mentality that has already taken root inside the barrier. Barbie realizes he is trapped between a hammer and an anvil, the tyranny of Big Jim Rennie inside, and the lethal incompetence of the military outside. Meanwhile, the social rot spreads to the streets. Samantha Bushy, a young mother, encounters the town's first selectman, Andy Sanders. Sanders is a broken shell, weeping and wandering, symbolizing the complete collapse of legitimate civilian government. In the power vacuum, predators like Frankie de Lesseps rise. Now armed and uniformed, Frankie harasses Sammy with a mix of sexual menace and authoritarian arrogance. The interaction is terrifying because it highlights how quickly the weak are left defenseless. There are no checks and balances left. A badge and a gun are now the only law that matters, and they are in the hands of the town's worst elements. The tragedy of Rory Dinsmore reaches its inevitable conclusion in the failing hospital. The scene is a grim tableau of resource scarcity. Dr. Haskell and Rusty Everett attempt brain surgery with a saline drip and a Toyota repair manual for a guide, a heartbreaking detail that underscores their isolation. The boy dies, and in a cruel twist of fate, the strain kills Dr. Haskell moments later. The death of the town's senior physician is a symbolic blow. The old guard, the healers, and the rational men are checking out, leaving the town to the mercy of the violent and the corrupt. Seeking allies, Barbie visits Brenda Perkins, the widow of the former police chief. This meeting serves as a crucial vetting process. In the quiet of her backyard, stripped of the public posturing, Barbie reveals the truth behind his bad reputation. He recounts the altercation that made him a pariah, a 4-on-1 ambush by Junior Rennie and his friends, which Barbie survived through combat skill, only to be falsely accused of rape to cover their humiliation. Brenda listens, recognizing the ring of truth. She knows the corruption of the Rennie clan and the dark underbelly of the town her husband tried to police. An alliance is formed, fragile but necessary, born of shared secrets and the looming threat of the missile strike. The narrative closes with an image that redefines the atmosphere of the story. As the sun sets, the sky turns a bloody, bruised red. The dome is acting as a lens, trapping dust, pollen and smoke, distorting the light into a hellish glare. It is no longer just a wall. It is a dirty windshield on a vehicle speeding toward destruction. Barbie and Brenda watch this apocalyptic sunset, realizing that the air they breathe is becoming a finite resource. The visual is suffocating, a silent scream of nature itself. The beauty of the autumn evening is gone, replaced by the claustrophobic realization that they are sealed in a box where the light, the air, and the hope are slowly beginning to choke. The golden baseball and the glass cage. The sun sets over Chester's Mill, but it is no ordinary twilight. To the observer, it looks like a smear of infected flesh spreading across the western horizon, a visual testament to the toxic reality of the dome. Standing on the steps of the funeral home, Big Jim Rennie and Andy Sanders watch the day die. For Andy, the sight invokes biblical dread, a sense of the end times. But for Big Jim, fear is an emotion reserved for lesser men. He rejects the apocalypse, just as he rejects any notion that he is not in control. Here we see the fundamental psychological split that defines the town's leadership. Andy Sanders is consumed by guilt. Guilt over the meth factory they've been running, the money laundering, the shaky justifications of tithes sent to missionary societies. He wonders if the dome is divine punishment. Rennie, however, operates on a sociopathic level of pragmatism. To him, their criminal enterprise was merely economic stimulus, a way to keep the town from becoming a ghost town. He views the dome not as a cage, but as a closed ecosystem he can dominate. He is already planning to hoard resources, specifically propane, and ration them to the townspeople, the grasshoppers, while he and his loyal ants hold the keys to survival. It is the classic tyrant's playbook. Create scarcity, then present yourself as the sole provider. But Rennie's grip is threatened. Outside the town hall, a tableau of resistance is forming. Dale Barbie Barbara is conferring with Brenda Perkins and select woman Andrea Grinnell. To Rennie, this is an affront. He despises Barbie not just for being an outsider, but because Barbie represents a different kind of authority, one based on merit and composure rather than bullying. The conflict escalates when Barbie presents a letter from the President of the United States. While the letter is couched in diplomatic language, offering sympathy and resources, Rennie reads the subtext with the cunning of a political animal. The letter promotes Barbie to colonel and designates him as the military liaison. It promises aid, but demands cooperation. Rennie sees the velvet glove, but feels the iron fist inside it. He realizes that the federal government intends to circumvent his authority. But Rennie knows something the president doesn't. Inside the dome, possession is 9/10 of the law. He resolves right then that he will never hand his town over to a man he considers a drifter. While the adults play power games, a darker rot is spreading through the town's youth, exemplified by Rennie's son, Junior. In the suffocating darkness of a pantry, Junior Rennie sits with what he calls his girlfriends, the decaying bodies of Angie McCain and Dodie Sanders. This scene is a terrifying glimpse into the collapsing psyche of the town's younger generation. Junior is suffering from blinding migraines and visual hallucinations, likely a physical side effect of the dome's influence, but his madness is entirely his own. He treats the corpses with a tender, horrific domesticity, caressing them in the dark. It is a manifestation of total detachment from reality. In the dark of the pantry, the moral laws of the outside world no longer apply. Resistance, however, is not dead. Julia Shumway, the local newspaper editor, is mobilizing her own small army. She uses the town's children, skateboarding messengers, to distribute a one-sheet extra of the Democrat. The headline screams of a solution. The military plans to fire a cruise missile at the dome's border the following day. It is a beacon of hope, a promise of liberation. But for men like Rennie, the missile represents a countdown to the loss of his newfound absolute power. As night deepens, the predatory nature of the town's new law enforcement reveals itself. Sammy Bushy, a young mother living in a trailer, is awakened by a group of newly deputized thugs. Junior's friends, led by Frankie de Lesseps. They are drunk on alcohol and power. Under the guise of a police raid looking for drugs, they invade her home. The horror here is the speed at which civilization strips away. These young men, given badges by Rennie, immediately weaponize their authority to commit gang rape. It is a brutal lesson in the vulnerability of the weak when the rule of law is replaced by the rule of force. They tell Sammy that no one will believe her, and in Rennie's Chester's Mill, they are likely right. Elsewhere, Rennie is shoring up his defenses. He corners Andrea Grinnell, the drug-addicted third selectman. He knows her weakness, OxyContin, and he uses it with surgical precision. He blackmails her, threatening to cut off her supply if she sides with Barbie. It is a masterclass in manipulation. He frames his extortion as an act of kindness, a prescription for loyalty. Andrea, trapped by her pain and addiction, crumbles. Rennie has secured his political flank. But the night is not over, and Rennie's greatest test arrives in the form of Reverend Lester Coggins. The sweating, frantic minister comes to Rennie's home, claiming a divine revelation. Coggins believes the dome is God's judgment on their drug operation. He is consumed by the need for confession and purification by fire. He plans to expose everything, the meth lab, the money, the corruption, in the belief that the truth will shatter the dome. Rennie cannot allow this. He tries to reason with the man, using the same twisted logic he used on Andy Sanders, but Coggins is too far gone into religious mania. When the Reverend insists on confession, Rennie snaps. He grabs a heavy object from his desk, a gold-plated baseball, a trophy from a charity tournament. The irony is palpable. A symbol of community charity becomes the instrument of murder. Rennie strikes Coggins, splitting his scalp. But the Reverend is resilient, fueled by adrenaline and faith. He staggers, bleeding onto Rennie's carpet, trying to scream Coggins' final sermon. It is a messy, desperate struggle until Junior arrives. Here, the dynamic between father and son shifts irrevocably. Junior does not panic. He does not scream. He walks in, sees the carnage, and coolly finishes what his father started, strangling the life out of the Reverend. The boy who was cuddling corpses in a pantry is now the calmest man in the room. He takes charge of the disposal, wrapping the body in a tarp with practiced efficiency. Rennie, breathless and suffering from heart palpitations, watches his son with a mixture of gratitude and unease. Junior has a plan. They will not just hide the body, they will use it. They will frame Dale Barbara. As the town sleeps, waiting for a missile that might save them or kill them, the Rennie men cement their blood pact. Junior leaves to dispose of the body, and Big Jim cleans his trophy. The golden baseball is placed back in its lucite cradle, gleaming under the electric light. The sin has been committed, the witness silenced, and the trap set. Under the dome, the monsters are not supernatural beasts. They are the neighbors who believe they know what is best for you. The hammer against the dome. The morning of October 23rd in Chester's Mill begins not with the sunrise, but with a jarring, amplified invasion of privacy. Down by Chester Pond, the illusion of a romantic getaway is shattered for Thurston Marshall and Carolyn Sturgis. These two lovers, academics from Boston, represent the old world, a world of tenure, literature, and civil rights. But they are about to receive a violent crash course in the new reality of the dome. They are awakened by the blare of police loudspeakers announcing an evacuation. Panic sets in immediately, not just because of the noise, but because of the contraband, a bag of marijuana sitting in plain sight. It's a trivial offense in the grand scheme of a supernatural crisis, yet the paranoia is palpable. When the door bursts open, it isn't a rescue squad, it's the new face of authority in town. Junior Rennie and Frankie de Lesseps. The dynamic here is terrifyingly clear. We see the immediate decay of constitutional protection. These aren't professional officers. They are deputized bullies, drunk on power. Frankie and Junior mock the naked, terrified couple, reveling in the humiliation of people who, just days ago, would have been considered their social superiors. When Junior explains the evacuation, that the Air Force is firing a missile at the dome, he frames it with a chilling declaration: they aren't in the United States anymore. They are in the Kingdom of Chester now. It is a psychological turning point, the moment where the badge becomes a license for sadism rather than service. Yet, Stephen King is a master of duality. Just as we are ready to write Junior off as a complete monster, the narrative shifts on the camp road. The two bullies stumble upon two abandoned children, Alice and Aidan Appleton. Their mother left for food and never returned, a silent tragedy of the dome's severance of families. The children are starving, sucking on their fingers for comfort, a primal image of neglect. In this moment, the sociopathic veneer cracks. Junior Rennie, who moments ago was assaulting a professor, drops to his knees with genuine gentleness. He offers comfort and food. It's a complex psychological beat, the oath of duty warring with his darker impulses. For a fleeting second, the monster plays the hero, reminding us that in high-stress vacuums, human behavior becomes erratic and unpredictable. While the evacuation continues, the few competent police officers left, Jackie Wettington and Linda Everett, are patrolling the eerie silence of the town's western sector. Their investigation into the missing Reverend Coggins leads them to the parsonage, a place that feels wrong on a sensory level. Inside, they discover the secret life of the holy man, a bloody scourge for self-flagellation and pornography. It's a classic unveiling of small-town hypocrisy, where public piety masks private demons. Their search moves to the radio station, WCIK, which has become a ghost ship. The broadcast continues on automation, pumping out gospel music to an empty room, a surreal juxtaposition of cheerful hymns and total desolation. They sense a presence, a Mary Celeste vibe that screams danger. And they are right to be afraid. Hidden in the back, the erratic Chef Bushy is losing his mind. Wasted by drug use and sleeplessness, he watches them through a window, armed and paranoid, believing he is fighting demons. He views the world through a lens of spiritual psychosis, obsessed with his Atman, or soul. The officers leave, unaware of how close they came to death, highlighting the invisible, ticking bombs hidden throughout the town. At the hospital, the creeping entropy of the situation becomes undeniable. Rusty Everett, the physician's assistant holding the medical infrastructure together, discovers that the hospital's propane supply is suspiciously low. It's the first hint of the resource wars to come, and the finger of suspicion points squarely at Big Jim Rennie. The logic is brutal. Those who control the fuel control the town. Rusty's exhaustion is compounded by a visit from Andrea Grinnell, a woman desperate not for food or safety, but for OxyContin. It is a tragic portrait of addiction in the face of apocalypse. Andrea knows her timing is horrific, but the chemistry of the brain doesn't care about force fields. Rusty, displaying the pragmatic compassion that defines his character, agrees to help her taper off rather than forcing a cold turkey withdrawal that could kill her. It's a quiet act of heroism, managing the internal crises of the townspeople while the external threat looms overhead. The narrative tension tightens as the focus shifts to the resistance. Dale Barbara, now reinstated as a colonel, teams up with the local journalist Julia Shumway and a group of bright teenagers. They aren't content to wait in the dark. They want to witness the missile strike. Using a laptop and a boosted Wi-Fi signal provided by the military outside, they set up a live feed near the dome's wall. This act of transparency threatens the town's authoritarian grip. Big Jim Rennie and Chief Randolph arrive to shut it down. The confrontation on Little Bitch Road is more than a dispute over a laptop. It is a battle for the narrative, Rennie wants to control what the people see and know. If the missile fails, he wants to manage the panic and the power that comes with it, but Barbie and Julia outmaneuver him. By revealing that the feed is already broadcasting live to hundreds of people gathered at Dipper's Roadhouse, they force Rennie's hand. He cannot shut it down without revealing his tyranny too early. Rennie's retreat is tactical, but his parting words to Barbie are venomous. He warns Barbie that he is in the pot, a chilling metaphor implying that they are all ingredients in a stew Rennie intends to cook. It's a declaration of war. Rennie acknowledges that if the missile breaks the dome, he loses, but if it fails, the town belongs to him. High above the earth, the military machinery grinds into motion. The operation, codenamed Grand Isle, involves a B-52 bomber and the sophisticated Fast Hawk cruise missile. The perspective shifts to the cockpit, emphasizing the technological might of the United States. There is a sense of desperate optimism from the military command. They are throwing their sharpest spear at the indestructible shield. The description of the missile's flight is visceral. A machine moving at Mach speeds, tearing through the atmosphere, terrified civilians on the ground, marking its passage by the sonic booms. It is the pinnacle of human engineering, a weapon designed to penetrate bunkers and level cities. Inside the dome, the atmosphere at Dipper's Roadhouse is electric. Hundreds of citizens stand shoulder to shoulder, eyes glued to the screen. It is a moment of collective breath-holding, a community united by the hope of deliverance. They hear the sound first, a rising hum that vibrates in the teeth. Then, the impact. The Fast Hawk missile, targeting the red X spray-painted on the barrier, strikes with perfect precision. But the laws of physics as we know them do not apply here. The explosion is blinding, a white-hot release of energy. But when the glare fades, the truth is revealed in the scorched earth and the falling debris. The missile didn't punch through. It didn't even scratch the surface. It detonated against the invisible wall, the force rebounding outward, incinerating the woods on the outside, but leaving the inside untouched, save for the visual terror of the blast. Desperate, the military fires a second missile. The result is identical. The dome is not just a wall, it is an absolute limit. The failure is absolute. As the smoke clears on the screen, the psychological weight of the event settles on Chester's mill. The hammer has struck the anvil, and the anvil didn't even shudder. They are truly alone, trapped in a cage that even the most powerful weapons on Earth cannot break. And as Big Jim Rennie predicted, with the hope of rescue extinguished, the real game for control of the town is about to begin. Pink stars and black hearts. The crushing weight of hopelessness descends upon 19 Mill Street, not with a bang, but with the silence that follows a failed salvation. The United States military has fired its missile, the might of the outside world has struck the barrier, and the dome remains. Scratched perhaps, but unbroken. Inside the McClatchy home, the psychological toll of this failure is instantaneous. It is the death of the deus ex machina. Norrie Calvert crumbles into tears, a reaction that forces the boys, Benny and Joe, into a premature adulthood. They grip each other's wrists in a soul shake, a silent pact of solidarity over her bowed head. They are no longer just teenagers. They are survivors in a closed ecosystem. Barbie, observing this tableau, realizes the danger has shifted. It is no longer just about the barrier, it is about the despair inside it. He sees the smoke rising in the west. The heat from the missile strike has ignited the woods. The irony is bitter. The government's attempt to save them has only threatened to burn them alive. Julia Shumway, ever the pragmatist, steps up. But here we see the fracturing of authority. When Joe's mother, Claire, mentions that the president put Barbie in charge, Barbie has to admit the grim reality. Titles mean nothing to men like Jim Rennie. The chain of command has been severed by the dome, replaced by the law of the jungle. Outside, Julia delivers a scathing psychological profile of the town's selectmen. She identifies Peter Randolph not as a lawman, but as a dullard who bullied his way through life. But her analysis of Big Jim Rennie is even more chilling. She recognizes the specific pathology of the dangerous leader, the cowardice beneath the bluff. She posits that Rennie is the type of man who would burn the town to ash if he thought he could rule over the cinders. It is a terrifying insight into the narcissistic collapse that occurs when small men are given absolute power. Julia, realizing the official infrastructure is broken, decides to bypass the government entirely. She plans to draft Brenda Perkins to handle the fire, a move that signifies the birth of a resistance, a shadow government operating on competence rather than corruption. While the good people scramble to save the town, the bad people consolidate their hold. We find Big Jim and Chief Randolph watching the despair of the townsfolk with perverse satisfaction. For Rennie, the missile's failure is a political victory. Hope is his enemy because hope looks outward, despair looks inward to him. He dismisses the fire on the horizon as a Tarker's Mills problem, displaying a sociopathic lack of empathy for the very territory he claims to govern. He is already spinning the narrative, blaming the fire on Barbie and the government. It is classic gaslighting. Create the crisis or allow it to happen, and then blame the opposition. But the true horror of the dome's influence is manifesting in the hidden corners of Chester's Mill. We move to the tragic figure of Sammy Bushy. If Rennie represents political evil, what has happened to Sammy represents primal chaotic evil. Having been gang-raped by Rennie's deputies, she wakes to a nightmare. Her trailer is a scene of domestic devastation, her baby, little Walter, injured by a collapsed crib. Sammy is dissociated, operating on a grim autopilot. The text paints a visceral picture of her physical trauma, the bleeding that won't stop, the pain that makes walking an agony. She is a mother reduced to base survival instincts. Sammy's journey down Motton Road is a harrowing pilgrimage. She is bleeding out, her mind drifting into a haze of trauma and narcotics. She finds a threatening note from her attackers, a reminder that in this new world, victimhood is a crime punishable by further violence. The psychological weight crushes her as she hallucinates, the heat of the unseasonably warm October sun beating down like judgment. She collapses, not a person anymore, but a broken vessel on the side of the road, her baby wailing in the dust. It is a stark reminder that while the powerful play chess, the weak are being ground into dust. Back in town, Barbie encounters the newcomers at the town hall, Thurston Marshall, Carolyn Sturgis, and the children, Alice and Aidan. These are the innocents, the refugees caught in a war zone they don't understand. They speak of a run-in with Junior Rennie, confirming that the rot in the police force is systemic. They were assaulted and robbed of their marijuana, a petty tyranny that underscores the collapse of civil rights. Rusty Everett, the physician's assistant, observes this group from the shadows. Rusty is the town's eyes, quiet and analytical. He notices something disturbing about the little boy, Aidan, a migraine, a vacant stare. It mirrors the symptoms of Junior Rennie, suggesting a biological or perhaps electromagnetic effect of the dome itself. Rusty also witnesses a meeting between the Rennie clan. He sees the physical toll the stress is taking on Big Jim, but more importantly, he sees the dynamic between father and son. Junior is suffering, his head pounding with a pain that seems almost supernatural, yet his father offers only platitudes. Rusty then intercepts Barbie in the town hall. This meeting is pivotal. They descend into the fallout shelter, a Cold War relic that has suddenly become relevant. They find a Geiger counter, a tool for measuring invisible death, but its battery is dead, a metaphor perhaps for their lack of information. However, their reconnaissance of the supply shed reveals the true depth of the corruption. They find a massive propane tank hooked up to the town hall's generator. Rusty recognizes it immediately. It is marked CR Hosp. It is the stolen tank from the hospital. The implication is staggering. Rennie and his cronies are hoarding energy, literally stealing the power required to keep the sick alive, to light their own administrative fortress. It is the ultimate betrayal of the social contract. While Barbie and Rusty uncover the theft, Junior Rennie initiates a theft of his own, a theft of identity. Battling his blinding migraine, which has turned his vision into a pulsating red nightmare, Junior breaks into Barbie's apartment. He is seeking leverage, something to destroy the man his father fears. Junior's internal monologue is a cesspool of entitlement and violent fantasy. He contemplates defiling Barbie's bed, a childish urge that masks a dangerous psychosis. He finds Barbie's dog tags hidden in a sock. To Junior, this is gold. It is the frame his father asked for. With these tags, they can construct a narrative to destroy the outsider. Out on the edge of town, the firefight offers a counter-narrative to Rennie's corruption. Brenda Perkins, spurred by Julia, has taken command. Here we see the natural order of leadership reasserting itself. There is no coercion here, only the shared goal of survival. Romeo Burpee and the other volunteers respect competence, not titles. The fire is contained, not by the police, but by the community. It is a fleeting moment of victory, a suggestion that the town might survive if it can shed the parasites feeding on it. But the narrative swings back to the darkness at the hospital. Piper Libby, the reverend who rescued Sammy from the roadside, is undergoing her own transformation. She sits with Ginny and Twitch, the medical staff who are overwhelmed by the carnage. When she learns the extent of Sammy's violation, something fractures in Piper. She recalls her father's lessons about controlling her temper, but the red fissure in her mind is widening. She channels a righteous, almost Old Testament fury. She interrogates the traumatized Sammy, forcing the names of the rapists from her lips. It is a brutal act of mercy. She saves Sammy by hurting her, extracting the truth like a bullet. Piper is no longer just a shepherd. She is becoming a wolf hunter. And then, the dome asserts its true alien nature. The script moves from human evil to cosmic horror. Linda Everett receives a terrifying phone call. Her daughter Judy has had a seizure. But it is not a normal medical event. Judy speaks a phrase that chills the blood. The pink stars are falling. At the exact same moment at the parsonage, the little boy Aidan Appleton collapses during a game of red light. The innocence of the game shatters as he falls into a convulsions. His words mirror Judy's, linking the children in a psychic network of terror. The pink stars are falling, he chants. They make lines behind them. But Aidan says more. He speaks of the chef. He says it's his fault. He's the one. This is the tipping point. The political maneuvering, the hoarding of propane, the framing of Barbie, all of these human dramas are suddenly dwarfed by an intrusion from the unknown. The seizures suggest that the dome is not just a wall. It is a transmitter. It is doing something to the vulnerable minds inside. The pink stars are not celestial bodies. They are a vision of the mechanism that holds them prisoner. And the chef. This suggests an intelligence behind the glass, or perhaps a human agent who triggered this catastrophe. When Aidan wakes up, he smiles the sweetest, most terrifying smile Carolyn Sturgis has ever seen and asks, "Did I win?" The juxtaposition of his seizure and his innocent question suggests that the children are being used as conduits. They are seeing the machinery of their own imprisonment. As night approaches Chester's Mill, the board is set. The good characters, Barbie, Rusty, Julia, Brenda, Piper, are gathering evidence and finding their strength. The bad characters, Rennie, Junior, the rapists, are hoarding power and plotting destruction. But above them all, the dome is active. The pink stars are falling in lines, and the air smells bad, and the darkness is no longer just the absence of light. It is a presence. The rabbit hole has gone deeper than politics. deeper than survival. It has gone into the minds of the children, and whatever is whispering to them has only just begun to speak. Pink stars and painted lies. The air inside the dome was already changing. It wasn't just the physical stagnation, the exhaust fumes trapped in the shed, or the lingering tang of the fire west of town. It was a psychic shift, a thickening of the atmosphere that Dale Barbara and Rusty Everett could feel in their marrow. As they stepped out into the smoky twilight, the reality of their confinement began to settle in, heavy and suffocating. Rusty, the town's physician assistant and moral compass, was already seeing the fractures in the community. He spoke of the hospital's dwindling propane and his intent to confront Big Jim Rennie, the second selectman and town patriarch. It's a classic study in the futility of logic against tyranny. Rusty believes that if he just explains the desperate medical need, Rennie will release the town's stockpiles. But Barbie, the outsider with the combat-hardened instincts, knows better. He recognizes the dangerous stillness of a predator waiting to pounce. Rennie isn't a man to be pressed, especially not when the world has just shrunk to the size of his fiefdom. While Rusty worries about seizures plaguing the town's children, episodes marked by strange babbling about pink stars and Halloween, Big Jim Rennie is sitting in his study, insulated by self-righteousness and a plate of Stauffer's fettuccine alfredo. Stephen King often grounds his monsters in the mundane, and Rennie is no exception. He has just murdered Lester Coggins, yet he feels no guilt, only the satisfied glow of a man who has performed a necessary kindness. To the narcissist, elimination of an obstacle is an act of love, or at least that's the lie he feeds himself. He speaks to the empty room, mocking the dead man, secure in his power. But the rot is spreading close to home. His son, Junior, enters the room, a hollow shell of a young man. Junior's headache is gone, cured by a gruesome vigil in the McCain pantry, holding hands with the corpses of the women he helped kill. There is a terrifying disconnect here. Junior is becoming a vessel for something else, his eyes empty, his smile resembling a skull. He and his father are two sides of the same coin, one actively malicious, the other passively eroding into madness. They discuss framing Barbie for the murders, plotting to use the town's fear to hang an innocent man. Rennie dreams of the cover of Time magazine, completely oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the fact that he is ruling over a cage. Across town, the veil of secrecy begins to tear for Brenda Perkins. Sitting in her late husband's chair, she reads the Vader file, a dossier of Big Jim's crimes compiled by the late chief of police. It's a revelation of industrial-scale corruption, money laundering through churches, a massive drug operation, and a trail leading to mainland China. Brenda realizes that Rennie isn't just a crook. He is the monkey trap metaphor come to life, the creature that refuses to let go of the prize even when it means its own destruction. Rennie could have taken his millions and fled to a tropical paradise, but his ego is tethered to Chester's Mill. Without the town to dominate, he is nothing. Brenda resolves to use this information to force a resignation, unaware that in a sealed ecosystem, knowledge is often a death sentence. The narrative tension snaps violently at the police station. Piper Libby, the town's reverend, is a woman of peace pushed past her breaking point. She has learned that the new police force, a collection of thugs and bullies deputized by Rennie, has raped a young woman named Sammy Bushy. Piper marches to the station, her golden retriever, Clover, at her side. What she finds is a tableau of degeneration. The officers are drinking on the steps, laughing, high on the power the dome has granted them. This is the Stanford prison experiment in real time. Give small men badges and no accountability, and the veneer of civilization vanishes in hours. When Piper confronts them, the violence is immediate. She pushes back against their smugness, but she is outmatched. She is shoved down the stone steps, dislocating her shoulder in a spray of agony. The brutality escalates when her dog, Clover, defending his mistress, attacks the corrupt officer Carter Thibodeau. The response is swift and heartless. Freddie Denton shoots the dog dead. It is a shocking, visceral moment that signals the end of law and order. The police are no longer guardians. They are an occupying force. It is Barbie who steps into this chaos, not as a soldier, but as a healer. The scene in the chief's office is a masterclass in controlled de-escalation. While the corrupt cops posture and the useless Chief Randolph dithers, Barbie takes charge of Piper's injury. He uses a technique from Iraq, the wishbone maneuver, to reset her shoulder. It's a moment of grim intimacy and competence amidst the hysteria. Barbie warns them to wait on the politics and focus on the medical reality, proving that true leadership is often quiet and practical, standing in stark contrast to Rennie's bluster. Meanwhile, Rusty acts on his promise to confront Big Jim. The meeting is a collision of two different realities. Rusty is looking for logic and empathy. Rennie offers only gaslighting and obstruction. The selectman denies knowledge of the missing propane, despite the obvious lies. He sits in a room decorated with trophies and religious iconography, a shrine to his own ego, dismissing the town's medical crisis as nitpickery. Rusty leaves with his rage barely contained, realizing that the hospital and the lives within it are leverage in Rennie's game. As night fully descends, the dome offers its first spectacular and terrifying display. The pink stars that the children prophesied begin to fall. It starts with the outliers. The chef, the town's meth cook, hallucinates a fiery Jesus in the sunset before witnessing the phenomenon. Andrea Grinnell, suffering from withdrawal, has an out-of-body experience, her spirit rising through her ceiling to see the galaxy turned the wrong color. Then, the town sees it. Meteors, thousands of them, striping the sky. But they aren't white or yellow. They are a brilliant, synthetic pink. The science behind it is grimly mundane. The dome has trapped the industrial pollution of the eastern seaboard, creating a dirty filter that distorts the starlight. But to the people of Chester's Mill, it looks like the apocalypse. The psychological weight of this visual is crushing. It brings people into the streets weeping and holding one another. It drives Jack Evans, grieving his wife, to put a Ruger to his head and pull the trigger, becoming the dome's first suicide. The beauty of the falling stars is a cruel irony. They are trapped in a snow globe, and the snow is toxic dust. At the edge of the dome, a different kind of drama plays out. Colonel Cox, the military liaison, oversees a desperate, clandestine attempt to breach the barrier using a hypercorrosive experimental acid. Barbie, Julia Shumway, and Lissa Jameson watch from the inside. The experiment is a failure. The acid doesn't even scratch the surface. The dome simply eats it. This failure forces a terrifying conversation. The military scientists, stripped of their rational explanations, are left with the Sherlock rule. Once the impossible is eliminated, the improbable remains. They are leaning toward extraterrestrial origins. We are not looking at a government conspiracy, but perhaps something biological, or something sent by an intelligence so far beyond ours that we are merely ants in a jar. As the acid fails and the pink stars continue their silent, weeping descent, the people of Chester's Mill are left with two terrifying realizations. Externally, they are rats in a lab experiment run by forces they cannot comprehend. Internally, they are locked in a cage with a monster named Big Jim Rennie, who is just beginning to flex his claws. The stars are falling, and the long night has truly begun. The rot under the dome. To understand the decay rapidly consuming Chester's Mill, one must first understand the psyche of its self-appointed king, James Big Jim Rennie. His philosophy isn't rooted in governance or civic duty, but in something far more visceral, something he identifies with high school girls' basketball, specifically the hatred of losing. Rennie idolized a player named Hannah Compton, a girl who played with a sneering, brutal intensity, a get-out-of-my-way-or-I'll-run-you-down attitude. Rennie calls this state of being feeling it, It is a sensation akin to divinity, a manic high where intuition becomes prophecy and every obstacle transforms into an opportunity. It is a delusion of grandeur common among sociopaths, where the world aligns perfectly with their will, or so they believe. As the town sits trapped under the dome, Big Jim is definitely feeling it. He isn't exhausted by the crisis, he is energized by it. He sees the panic not as a tragedy, but as a mechanism to seize total control. His plan is simple and draconian: close the grocery stores and the gas station. By controlling the resources, he controls the population. He masks this power grab as a rationing plan for the town's benefit, but his internal monologue reveals the truth. He wants to be the one handing out the bread. He wants the town to beg. This hunger for control extends to his enforcement arm. Rennie holds a clandestine meeting with his new police force, a group of young, unqualified and morally bankrupt recruits: Frank, Carter, Mel and Georgia. They stand before him, not as guardians of the peace, but as accomplices seeking absolution. They admit to a horrific act: gang raping Sammy Bushy, a local girl, under the pretense of a party. They try to spin the narrative, claiming it was consensual, blaming the victim's reputation. Here, we see the terrifying magnetism of Big Jim's corruption. Instead of punishing them, he absolves them. He manipulates their guilt, twisting the narrative until the victim is the villain and these predators are merely misunderstood officers. By accepting their lie, he owns them. He secures their loyalty not through respect, but through shared complicity in darkness. He warns them about carrying personal firearms, asserting his dominance, before leading them in a grotesque parody of prayer. It is the ultimate hypocrisy: invoking God while sanctioning rape and preparing to starve a town. Meanwhile, Dale Barbie Barbara returns to his apartment to find his sanctuary violated. The signs are subtle, but screaming to a trained soldier's eye. A rug, a souvenir from Iraq that he superstitiously never steps on, has been moved. His clothes are rearranged. His dog tags are gone. The violation of his personal space signals a shift in the wind. He is being framed. The invisible noose is tightening. Barbie knows that in this pressure cooker, time is a luxury he doesn't have. He immediately calls Brenda Perkins, the widow of the former police chief. Brenda is waking up to a nightmare of her own. Barbie instructs her to take the Vader file, a dossier her late husband compiled proving Rennie's massive criminal enterprise involving methamphetamine production and money laundering, and hide it with the local newspaper editor, Julia Shumway. Barbie warns her that the arrest is coming, that accidents will happen. He understands the tactical reality of the dome. There is nowhere to run, and the law is whatever the man with the biggest stick says it is. Brenda, fueled by grief and a sudden clarity, follows his advice, locking the laptop in a safe and preparing the physical file for transfer. She believes, naively perhaps, that the truth is a shield. She doesn't yet realize that under the dome, the truth is just another thing that can be crushed. The sun rises on Tuesday, bringing with it the catalyst for chaos. Big Jim's plan goes into effect. The citizens of Chester's Mill arrive at Food City to find the doors locked and a sign declaring the market closed until further notice. This moment is a case study in the fragility of the social contract. Confronted with the sudden denial of basic sustenance, the veneer of civilization begins to crack. The crowd is initially confused, then indignant. They see the shelves stocked with food through the glass, yet they are denied access. The police presence, the very same unqualified goons Rennie absolved the night before, only exacerbates the tension. They are arrogant, aggressive, and clearly out of their depth. Rose Twitchell, the owner of the local diner, tries to reason with them, but reason holds no currency here. The crowd grows. Anxiety morphs into a mob mentality. It's a powder keg waiting for a spark. And Big Jim Rennie, the conductor of this dissonance, ensures the spark is lit. He has dispatched his son, Junior Rennie, to recruit the town drunk, sloppy Sam Verdrow. Junior, who is suffering from blinding headaches and hiding his own dark secrets involving the rotting bodies of 2 murdered girls in his pantry, acts as his father's agent of chaos. He bribes Sam with whiskey to throw a rock, not just at the store, but specifically at a nurse in the crowd who had witnessed the aftermath of the rape. It is a calculated act of malice designed to turn a protest into a riot. Sam throws the rock. It strikes Georgia Rue, one of the female officers, destroying her jaw. The violence is sudden and shocking. The mob, primed by fear and heat, explodes. The chant shifts from "open up" to "get them." The thin blue line of incompetent police collapses instantly. Officers fire wildly into the air or are trampled. The crowd smashes through the doors. What follows is the Great Supermarket Riot, a tragic display of humanity stripped of its inhibitions. Neighbors fight over sugar and lemon cakes. A man is blinded by a bag of flour. The looting isn't driven by immediate starvation. The town has plenty of food, but by the primal panic of scarcity. It is the collective realization that the old world is gone, and in this new world it is take or be taken. Barbie, arriving on the scene with Rose and Julia, attempts to stem the tide. He understands that you cannot command a mob. You have to change its temperature. He hands Rose a bullhorn. Instead of shouting orders, she invites everyone to her diner for free coffee. She treats them like neighbors, not criminals. For a brief moment, the strategy works. The shame of their actions begins to take hold, the collective rage cools, but this fragile peace is shattered by acting chief Peter Randolph. Acting on Rennie's philosophy of dominance, Randolph storms in, shouting threats and orders, reigniting the antagonism. He brands them looters, cementing the division between the law and the people. Barbie sees the futility of it. The authorities want a war because a war justifies their power. While the town tears itself apart over canned goods, a quieter, deadlier tragedy plays out on the upper streets. Brenda Perkins is on a mission to expose the rot. She tries to deliver the Vader file to Julia Shumway, but the newspaper office is locked. Desperate, she turns to Andrea Grinnell, a select woman who has been sympathetic in the past. However, Brenda makes a critical error. She underestimates the toll the dome takes on the weak. Andrea is sick, feverish, and possibly going through withdrawal. She takes the envelope, but in her delirium, she loses it behind a couch before passing out. The damning evidence, the one thing that could stop Big Jim, slides into the dark, forgotten. Believing she has secured her insurance policy, Brenda decides to confront the beast in his lair. She marches to Big Jim's house. She finds him sitting on his lawn, watching the empty street, basking in the chaos he has orchestrated. He is feeling it. The confrontation that follows is a collision of 2 incompatible realities. Brenda believes she is in a political drama where evidence and moral outrage have weight. She lays out what she knows: the meth lab, the money laundering through China, the corruption. She threatens him with exposure, demanding his resignation. She believes she holds the cards. Big Jim, however, knows he is in a different genre entirely. He listens to her with the patience of a predator watching prey struggle in a trap. He realizes 2 things. First, that she doesn't actually have the file on her, and second, that she has failed to deliver it to anyone who matters. He sees the holes in her defense that she cannot. When Brenda stands to leave, thinking she has delivered her ultimatum, the horror of her situation crashes down. Big Jim doesn't fear the truth, because he controls the context in which truth exists. He stands, his movements deceptively fast for a man of his bulk. He doesn't argue, he doesn't negotiate. In a moment of brutal, visceral violence that underscores the true nature of his governance, he grabs Brenda. There is a sickening crack, the sound of a branch breaking under ice. He snaps her neck. It is efficient, remorseless, and terrifyingly casual. But the horror doesn't end with her death. Rennie's psychosis demands that he not only kill her, but mock her humanity. He drags her corpse back to the lawn chair. He places a baseball cap on her head to hide her face and sets a pumpkin in her lap. He transforms a woman who stood for justice into a grotesque Halloween decoration, a prop in his stage play. He sits back, waiting for his son to come home to help dispose of the body, utterly undisturbed by the murder he has just committed. The riot at the supermarket, the rape by his officers, the murder of the chief's widow, it is all part of the same tapestry. Big Jim Rennie is feeling it. The dome has not just trapped them in. It has locked them in a cage with a monster who believes he is God, and as the sun sets, the rot under the dome has only just begun to spread. The generator on Black Ridge. The psychological architecture of a small town is fragile even on a sunny Tuesday. Place an impenetrable, transparent barrier over that town, trapping the saints with the sinners, and the structural integrity of civilization begins to groan under the weight of immediate localized tyranny. We return to the escalating nightmare of Chester's Mill, where the dome has not only cut off the outside world, but has begun to incubate a poisonous heat within the hearts of its residents. We find ourselves at a pivot point, the moment where political maneuvering creates a landslide into authoritarianism, and where the innocence of youth is pitted against an alien reality that defies physics. We begin in the immediate, silent aftermath of a crime that will define the new order. Big Jim Rennie, the town's second selectman and emerging dictator, has crossed a line from corruption to capital violence. He has murdered Brenda Perkins, the wife of the late police chief. The terrifying thing about Rennie isn't just the act itself, but the chilling introspection that follows. He reflects on murder not with guilt, but with a consumerist detachment, likening the act to eating potato chips, difficult to stop after just one. This is the psychology of the sociopath unmasked. The dome has removed the fear of external judgment, leaving only his ambition. He moves through the town believing his secret is safe, unaware that 3 pairs of young eyes, children playing at being spies, might have seen Brenda before her demise, though they missed the act itself. These children, Joe McClatchy, Benny Drake and Norrie Calvert, represent the classic king archetype, the losers club, the outcast youth who see the truth that adults are too blinded by bias to perceive. They are gathered at the Peace Bridge, a condemned structure that serves as a liminal space between the known town and the wilder woods. Here, they engage in a ritual of pseudo-adulthood, smoking stale cigarettes stolen from a parent. It's a poignant moment of lost innocence. Norrie, the sharp-tongued leader of this trio, frames it as a prayer to the gods for a successful hunt. They aren't hunting animals, but the source of their imprisonment. They are looking for the generator of the dome. There is a profound irony in their mission. While the adults of Chester's Mill are descending into looting at the supermarket or political infighting at the police station, the children are applying logic. Using a map drawn on an athletic sock, a symbol of their makeshift, desperate resources, they deduce that if the dome is a generated force field, the transmitter must be situated on high ground. They target Black Ridge. It is the clarity of youth, unburdened by the convoluted power struggles of their parents, that allows them to see the tactical reality of the situation. They arm themselves with a Geiger counter, a relic of the Cold War, and venture out. Meanwhile, the machinery of the coup d'etat is grinding into motion. Big Jim is not merely reacting to events, he is scripting them. In his study, he orchestrates the narrative that will frame an innocent man. He speaks to his son, Junior Rennie, a young man suffering from debilitating migraines and a crumbling psyche, and gives him marching orders. The plan is to arrest Dale Barbara, the former Army veteran who has been the town's reluctant hero. The charge is monstrous. The murder of 4 citizens, including the very woman Big Jim just killed. Here we see the weaponization of law enforcement. Big Jim manipulates the incompetent police chief, Peter Randolph, into expanding the force with trustworthy thugs, violent young men who will answer only to Rennie. This is the moment a police force transitions into a paramilitary death squad. The recruitment of the Killian boys and the deputizing of Junior are not about keeping the peace. They are about enforcing a new regime where loyalty outweighs legality. The confrontation occurs at the local hospital, a place of healing that becomes the stage for a violent theatrical performance. Dale Barbara, known as Barbie, is there helping the wounded from a recent supermarket riot. He's patching up lacerations, soothing the injured, acting as a pillar of stability. When the police arrive, led by Randolph and the unstable Junior, the cognitive dissonance is staggering. Barbie surrenders, raising his hands, displaying his lack of injuries to Rusty Everett, the town's physician assistant and moral compass. This scene is critical because it draws the battle lines for the town's soul. Rusty tries to intervene, pointing out the absurdity of the charges, but he is physically restrained by his own wife, Linda, a police officer who has bought into the lie. This domestic schism mirrors the town's fracture. Linda wants to believe in the chain of command, in the badge, unable to see that the authority she respects has been hollowed out and filled with rot. The arrest is brutal. A gun goes off, a negligent discharge by the chief, signaling the amateurish and dangerous nature of this new law. Barbie is punched in the gut, humiliated and dragged away, leaving the hospital in shock and the power grid failing, plunging the building into darkness. While the town's hero is shackled, the children's expedition into the woods takes a turn toward the Eldritch. As Joe, Benny and Norrie push toward Black Ridge, the environment begins to scream. They encounter a scene of environmental horror. A group of deer, legs broken, dead at the bottom of a ravine. They didn't fall, they jumped. It implies a psychic pressure, a frequency of dread so intense that it drove instinctual animals to mass suicide. Further on, they find a bear with its skull crushed against a telephone pole, another victim of self-inflicted violence. This introduces a Lovecraftian element to the narrative. The dome isn't just a physical barrier, it is an active, malevolent presence. The Geiger counter begins to click, the radiation levels rising not to lethal nuclear levels, but high enough to indicate a power source of immense magnitude. The children are walking into the kill zone of an alien technology, driven by curiosity and the desperation to solve the puzzle that has trapped their families. Back in the heart of the town's corruption, the police station has become the headquarters of the lie. Junior Rennie provides a falsified statement to Chief Randolph, claiming to have found the bodies of the victims along with Barbie's dog tags, planted evidence, clutched in a dead woman's hand. Randolph, a man who once found Jesus and quit smoking, is now willfully blinding himself to the obvious setup. He accepts the story because it is easier than confronting the terrifying reality that the town's selectman is a monster. It is a study in cowardice. Randolph isn't evil in the way Rennie is. He is weak, and in times of crisis, weakness is the fertile soil in which evil grows. Barbie is processed into the jug, the basement holding cells. The veneer of due process is stripped away entirely. He is not given a lawyer, he is given a beating. Mel Searles, a man injured in the riots, is allowed into the secure area to assault the handcuffed prisoner with a weighted sock. It is a visceral, ugly unleashing of mob justice sanctioned by the badge. When Barbie tries to speak reason, to implore them to examine the bodies for forensic truth, he is silenced with mace. The chemical burn in his eyes mirrors the blindness of the town. He is locked away, isolated, the scapegoat burdened with the town's sins. But the most harrowing manipulation takes place between Big Jim and Andy Sanders. Andy is the first selectman, but he is a broken shell, having lost his wife and now his daughter in the chaos. He is a man hollowed out by grief, and Big Jim pours poison into that void. In the basement of the police station, amidst the smell of mace and fear, Andy demands a gun to kill Barbie himself. Rennie, playing the benevolent father figure, embraces the sobbing man. He promises execution. He promises revenge. This interaction captures the terrifying charisma of the demagogue. Rennie validates Andy's pain, but redirects it toward a convenient enemy. He hints that Barbie is an inside man for the Dome, an agent of the imprisonment. By converting Andy's grief into hatred, Rennie secures his hold on the town's political apparatus. He is consolidating power, not just through force, but through the emotional manipulation of the devastatingly vulnerable. Outside the station, the Fourth Estate attempts to make a stand. Julia Shumway, the editor of the local newspaper, demands answers. She is the voice of the old world, the world of accountability and facts, but she is physically barred from the truth. Big Jim dismisses her, threatening arrest, effectively suspending the freedom of the press. The truth is no longer what happened. The truth is what Big Jim says it is. The town is being sealed off informationally, just as it is physically. We return to the ridge, where the true power resides. The three children reach the perimeter of the apple orchard overlooking the town. The heat is oppressive, the sky a sickly yellow from trapped pollution. And then, the signal manifests. It isn't a sound, but a seizure. Norrie sees it first, not a machine, but a pulse. She tries to speak, to identify it as a beacon, but her neurology is hijacked. She collapses, seizing. Benny follows, and finally Joe. They are struck down by the intensity of the force radiating from the orchard. It is a purple light, flashing with a rhythmic, hypnotic cadence. This is the heartbeat of the Dome. The description of their collapse is terrifying because it suggests that the human brain is incompatible with the technology keeping them prisoner. They are overwhelmed, their consciousness fragmenting into visions of burning pumpkins and black holes. The Geiger counter screams its warning, the needle pushing toward the red, but there is no one left standing to read it. They lie twitching in the dirt, the only ones who know the location of the lock, rendered unconscious by the key. This narrative slice highlights the rapid decay of social contracts. In a matter of days, Chester's Mill has devolved from a community to a dictatorship. We see the layering of trauma, the physical trauma of the riot victims, the psychological trauma of the grieving survivors, and the societal trauma of a coup. The author masterfully juxtaposes the grand cosmic mystery of the purple flashing light with the petty, brutal tyranny of small-town politics. Big Jim's ascent is fueled by the chaos. He understands that frightened people do not want liberty, they want order, and they want someone to blame. By giving them Barbie as the villain, he provides a focal point for their rage, distracting them from the true horror of their situation and his own crimes. He is the spider at the center of the web, sensing every vibration, wrapping his prey in silk spun from lies. Yet, the existence of the generator on Black Ridge changes the calculus. The Dome is not a divine punishment or a natural disaster. It is a machine. And machines have operators. The seizures experienced by the children suggest a connection, a harsh interface between the captors and the captives. While the adults tear each other apart for scraps of power in the valley below, the silent sentinel on the hill continues to pulse, indifferent to the murders, the frames, and the tears of the innocent. As the sun sets, or rather, as the light fades behind the dirty fishbowl of the Dome, the stakes have shifted. The hero is in a cage, the villain holds the keys, and the discoverers of the truth lie unconscious in the dust. The claustrophobia is absolute. The heat is rising. And in the darkness of the jail cell, Dale Barbara waits, knowing that the morning will bring not a trial, but a lynching, unless the truth can break through the walls of the jug before the town suffocates on its own fear. The story of the Dome is a pressure cooker experiment on human nature. Remove the consequences, remove the escape routes, and apply heat. What boils to the surface is the raw, unrefined essence of humanity, some of it heroic, like the kids on their bikes, but much of it dark, violent, and endlessly hungry for control. The tragedy of Chester's Mill is that the alien wall is only the second most dangerous thing in town. The most dangerous thing is the man smiling, patting a grieving father on the back and whispering about execution. The rabbit hole in Maine. The invisible barrier that has descended upon Chester's Mill is doing far more than trapping air and blocking traffic. It is accelerating the darkest impulses of the human heart. We find Julia Shumway, the town's tenacious newspaper editor, storming away from a confrontation at the police station. She is seething, a mixture of adrenaline and righteous indignation, but beneath that fury lies a bedrock of pure terror. As she stalks past the female officers, Jackie Wettington and Linda Everett, Julia realizes that her anger is a defense mechanism against the realization that the rule of law has evaporated. It has been replaced by the whim of Big Jim Rennie. It is a terrifying psychological pivot point when a citizen realizes the police are no longer guardians of the peace, but enforcers of a new arbitrary order. Julia pauses at the bookstore, catching her reflection and the sight of her own disheveled state. It is a moment of vulnerability. When Pete Freeman finds her, she puts on a brave face, but her internal monologue reveals the stakes. She intends to write about the insanity gripping the town, specifically the murders for which Dale Barbara, Barbie, has been framed. Julia understands something crucial about power dynamics in closed systems. Big Jim Rennie has the home court advantage. In a sealed environment, the loudest, most aggressive voice often dominates before reason can lace up its boots. Rennie isn't waiting for a week or a month to consolidate power. He is striking while the shock is fresh, capitalizing on the chaos. Julia's fear is that the dome might lift, leaving Rennie exposed as a tyrant, but her deeper fear is that it won't, and his tyranny will become permanent. The narrative shifts to the spiritual fallout of this crisis. Piper Libby, the town's minister, is kneeling in the First Congo church. She is physically broken, a dislocated arm and swollen knees, but her spiritual fractures are more severe. She prays to a not there, a concept of a void where God used to be. This is a profound existential crisis, suitable for a cosmic horror setting. The dome has cut them off not just from the world, but perhaps from heaven itself. Her prayer is interrupted by the arrival of Romy Burpee, and eventually Julia and the female officers. The church, usually a place of public sanctuary, is no longer safe for truth-telling. They retreat to the parsonage, a clandestine meeting of the resistance. Here, the detective work begins, and the cracks in Rennie's frame-up become visible. Linda and Jackie, risking their careers and perhaps their lives, reveal a critical forensic detail. Rigor mortis. Brenda Perkins, the latest victim, was found in the early stages of rigor around mid-morning. This biological clock contradicts the official narrative. If Barbie had been at the Sweetbriar Rose since shortly before 6 in the morning, a fact confirmed by Rose Twitchell, he physically could not have committed the murder within the window that biology dictates. It is a triumph of logic over hysteria, yet in a town slipping into fascism, logic is a dangerous contraband. They are whispering facts in a room while lies are being shouted through megaphones outside. While the resistance gathers facts, the machinery of the town's drug trade, the dark underbelly that Rennie has exploited, is being dismantled, or at least rearranged. The Bowie brothers and Roger Killian arrive at the WCIK radio station complex, not for a broadcast, but to loot propane for the hospital. This scene highlights the grotesque juxtaposition of the sacred and the profane in Chester's Mill. Religious slogans are painted on the walls, yet the chef, Phil Bushy, is inside cooking crystal meth. Bushy is a ticking time bomb of paranoia, watching the men through a window, thumb hovering over a garage door opener that could detonate the facility. He views the interlopers as godless ones, interpreting his drug-induced psychosis as divine intervention. It is a chilling reminder that in high-stress survival situations, the unstable elements of society become exponentially more dangerous. Bushy decides to spare them, not out of mercy, but because he believes Jesus handled it. At the hospital, the struggle is not for political power, but for life itself. Dr. Rusty Everett is fighting a losing battle against entropy. The death of Jimmy Sirois, a diabetic patient, marks a grim milestone, the first casualty of the dome's resource constriction. The equipment failed because the power failed. It is a quiet tragedy amidst the loud political maneuvering. Yet, even here, there is resilience. Ginny Tomlinson and Gina Buffalino, battered and exhausted, form a pact to keep going. Ginny and Gina, the fighting females. It is a small human moment of solidarity that stands in stark contrast to the predatory alliances being formed by Rennie's crew. Rusty's reunion with his wife Linda provides a brief respite, a moment of intimacy in the gathering dark. But the war for the town intrudes immediately. They discuss the forensic evidence, the rigor mortis discrepancy, and the danger of exposing it. Rusty, ever the pragmatist, realizes that scientific exoneration means nothing if the judge and jury are the ones holding the smoking gun. The legal system has been decapitated, only the court of public opinion remains, and that is easily manipulated. Simultaneously, a discovery is made that shifts the genre from political thriller to science fiction mystery. Joe McClatchy and his friends, the Scarecrow Joe gang, have located something on Black Ridge, a signal, a generator, a purple strobe light pulsing with radiation. This is the heartbeat of the dome. The fact that teenagers are the ones to find it is a classic trope, emphasizing that while the adults are busy killing each other for control of the cage, the youth are looking for the key to the lock. They have found the physical source of their imprisonment, a device that emits enough radiation to be dangerous, but not yet lethal. Back in the bowels of the police station, the psychological torture of Dale Barbara continues. Junior Rennie, the son of the new dictator, visits Barbie's cell. Junior is a portrait of deterioration. He is limping, his head is splitting with agony, and he is oscillating between manic humor and homicidal rage. He offers Barbie water, but it is a cruel joke. The water is heavily salted. This salting is symbolic on multiple levels. Historically, salting the earth was a way to ensure nothing would ever grow again. Junior and his father are effectively salting Chester's mill, destroying its future. Junior's physical symptoms, the limp, the headaches, the weeping eye, suggest that the dome, or perhaps the stress of his own malevolence, is eating him alive from the inside. He projects his own sickness onto Barbie, accusing the soldier of bringing the madness back from Iraq. It is a classic projection of the shadow self. Junior cannot face his own rot, so he sees it in his prisoner. Barbie, however, retains his survival instincts. He recognizes the trap. He pours out the poisoned water and drinks from the toilet tank. It is a debasing act, but a necessary one. It illustrates the stark reduction of life under the dome. Dignity is a luxury. Survival is non-negotiable. Meanwhile, Big Jim Rennie is consuming a corned beef sandwich with voracious animalistic hunger. His gluttony is a direct metaphor for his power grab. He consumes the town's resources, its laws, and its people with the same indiscriminate appetite. He dispatches Junior and his cronies on a mission of destruction, framing it as a necessity. He is creating a narrative of us versus them, mobilizing the hometown security force, a paramilitary group composed of bullies and blindly loyal fools. Rennie is effectively creating a brown-shirt militia, using the crisis to deputize the worst elements of the town. Sammy Bushy's journey through the night offers a different kind of horror, the horror of the victim pushed beyond endurance. Suffering from the after-effects of a brutal assault and a miscarriage, she is a ghost walking. Her encounter with the drunk Alden Dinsmore is a strange, melancholy interlude. Two broken people, both mourning lost children, Sammy's baby and Alden's son Rory, share a car ride through the dark. It is a moment of shared grief that transcends the chaos around them. But Sammy is not looking for comfort. She's looking for vengeance. She arrives at the Evans home not to find sanctuary, but to arm herself. She steals a gun. The victim is transforming into an avenger, a dangerous variable that Rennie has not accounted for. The narrative tension culminates at the offices of the Democrat. Julia, along with Pete Freeman and Tony Guai, is attempting to exercise the First Amendment in a town where the Constitution has been effectively suspended. They are printing a special edition, a truth bomb designed to disrupt Rennie's town meeting. Julia's meeting with Colonel Cox at the dome wall reveals the impotence of the outside world. The military can watch, they can advise, but they cannot intervene. They are spectators to a terrarium of violence. Julia realizes she is on her own. The press is the only weapon left. But Rennie knows this too. Fascism cannot tolerate a free press. The attack, when it comes, is brutal and cowardly. Junior Rennie and Carter Thibodeau, acting on Big Jim's orders, firebomb the newspaper office. The description of the arson is visceral. The smell of gasoline, the whoosh of ignition, the heat that sears the skin. They use Molotov cocktails, the tools of rioters, to silence the voice of reason. To add a layer of calculated deceit to the violence, they scream slogans through a bullhorn. Free Dale Barbara, or this is just the beginning. This is a false flag operation, pure and simple. By framing Barbie's non-existent Confederates for the arson, Rennie achieves two goals. He destroys the newspaper that threatens his narrative, and he further demonizes the man he has framed for murder. It is a Reichstag fire moment for Chester's Mill. The destruction of the newspaper office is a pivotal defeat for the resistance. Pete and Tony barely escape with their lives, fleeing the inferno. The physical destruction of the printing press symbolizes the end of objective truth in the town. Now the only information will come from Rennie's megaphone. The aftermath of the fire serves Rennie perfectly. He stands in the school gymnasium rallying his new police force. The fire whistle provides the perfect backdrop for his fear-mongering. He seizes control of the fire department's resources, specifically the Indian pumps, further consolidating his grip on every aspect of the town's infrastructure. He is the arsonist playing the firefighter, the wolf in shepherd's clothing. In the darkness of the jail, Barbie listens to the fire whistle and the taunts of his guard, Melvin Searles. The guard's threat is specific and chilling: waterboarding. Not fresh water either, salt. The torture techniques of the War on Terror have come home to roost in small-town Maine. The cycle of violence is complete. The town has become a prison camp, and the guards are the boys who used to bag groceries and pump gas. This section of the saga illustrates the rapidity of social collapse. It posits that civilization is a thin veneer, easily stripped away by fear and isolation. In just a few days, Chester's Mill has devolved from a sleepy community into a dictatorship where dissent is met with fire, the innocent are caged, and the truth is the first casualty. The dome acts as a magnifying glass, burning away the superficial niceties of society and revealing the raw, often ugly nature of the people trapped underneath. As the fire rages and the smoke rises to choke the limited air of the dome, we are left with a terrifying realization. The greatest danger isn't the alien barrier in the sky, nor the dwindling resources. The greatest danger is the neighbor who has been waiting for an excuse to take what he wants, and the leader who knows that frightened people will trade their freedom for the illusion of safety. The fire at the newspaper office is not just burning paper. It is burning the last remnants of the old world. What rises from the ashes will be something unrecognizable, shaped in the image of Big Jim Rennie. And in the shadows, armed with a stolen gun and a heart full of hate, Sammy Bushy is driving back into town, a wild card in a game that has already turned deadly. The pressure inside the dome is rising. And the explosion is just beginning. The ashes of Chester's Mill. The night air in Chester's Mill is no longer just trapped. It is burning. We find ourselves standing in the turnaround of the hospital, where the glow of a rising inferno down on Main Street paints the world in violently unnatural shades of orange and black. This isn't just a structure fire. It is the physical manifestation of the town's social fabric unraveling. Rusty Everett, the physician's assistant who has been holding the medical needs of the town together with duct tape and willpower, watches the flames. The cell phone on his belt chirps, a mundane sound in an apocalypse, connecting him to his wife, Linda. The conversation is brief, clipped, and laden with the terrifying new reality of the dome. Us versus them. Linda warns him to stay away from the official channels, to meet in the shadows of the Bowie funeral home. The lines are being drawn, not in sand, but in ash. The police force, once a symbol of order, has been co-opted, mutating into a private army for the town's selectmen. Rusty realizes that the teenagers standing with him, Twitch and Gina, are already indoctrinated into this tribalism. They accept that they are the ants to the grasshoppers of the police. It is a chilling sociological shift, the acceptance of a caste system in less than a week. While Rusty heads toward the clandestine meeting, Sammy Bushy is moving with the terrifying clarity of the dissociated. She is driving a stolen car, a .45 caliber pistol resting on the seat beside her like a passenger. Sammy has been victimized, stripped of her agency in the most brutal fashion by the town's darker elements, and now she has detached from the moral constraints of the world. She enters the hospital not as a patient, but as a ghost, pale, limping, and armed. Inside the hospital, we see a tragic juxtaposition of innocence and corruption. Thurston Marshall, a man of letters and intellect, finds a strange, perverse joy in the simple acts of caretaking, emptying bedpans and soothing fears. He represents the best of what the community could be, selfless service. He checks on the patients, including Sammy, who sits with her baby, little Walter. Thurston, in his naivety, misreads Sammy's calm. He sees a patient on the mend. He misses the 1,000-yard stare of a soldier, preparing for a final mission. Sammy tells her child she will see him in heaven because she has done her time in hell. This is the logic of the traumatized mind seeking terminal liberation. She hides the gun, feeds the child, and waits for the protector to leave so the executioner can emerge. Down on Main Street, the Democrat newspaper office, the bastion of free press and truth in Chester's Mill, is being murdered. This is arson fueled by Molotov cocktails and allowed to burn by a police force equipped with Indian pumps they refuse to use. Julia Shumway, the editor, stands with her corgi Horace watching her legacy vaporize. The crowd is sullen, cowed by the flashing lights of the police cruisers. It is a scene reminiscent of authoritarian regimes throughout history, the public destruction of dissent. Big Jim Rennie arrives, the architect of this chaos. The firelight illuminates his face, revealing a man in the throes of a narcissistic high. He taunts Julia, twisting reality with the ease of a practiced demagogue, claiming the fire was set by the imprisoned Dale Barbara's friends. This is classic gaslighting. Jim Rennie is rewriting history in real time, positioning himself as the savior against a fabricated terrorist threat. But beneath his bravado, his body is rebelling. His heart flutters and stalls, a physical arrhythmia mirroring the moral rot within him. He envisions his heart encased in yellow fat, a suffocating thing, yet he dismisses it. His hunger for power overrides his survival instinct. He is convinced of his own indispensability. He is the glue holding the town together, even as he melts it down. Back at the hospital, the bill comes due for the sins of the town. Sammy Bushy moves down the corridor to the room where Georgia Rue and Frank de Lesseps are kept. Frank is one of her rapists, a young man empowered by a badge and the collapse of law. Sammy finds a cruel get-well card on the door, a final insult that likely solidifies her resolve. Inside, the scene explodes into violence. Sammy is not looking for justice. She is looking for erasure. She shoots Frank, shattering his skull, turning the predator into a whimpering child calling for his mother in his final seconds. It is a gruesome, messy affair, devoid of cinematic glory. She executes Georgia next, cutting off her apologies. Sammy's mission is a scorched earth policy of the soul. With the perpetrators dead, she turns the gun on herself. The tragedy is absolute. The peace she finds is the peace of the grave. While the hospital descends into blood, Rusty Everett is descending into the literal underworld of the town, the prep room of the funeral home. It is a filth-ridden chamber, a sign of the disrespect the Bowie brothers have for the dead. But Rusty is here for truth, not hygiene. He and Linda, wearing masks against the stench of decomposition, examine the bodies that have been hidden away. This is the turning point where suspicion hardens into forensic fact. They examine the body of the Reverend Lester Coggins. Rusty, with the clinical eye of a medical professional, cleans the blood from the corpse's face. He finds the smoking gun, distinct, patterned bruising on the temple and forehead, stitches, not from a medical procedure, but from the impact of a baseball, specifically a signed souvenir baseball that Rusty knows sits on Big Jim Rennie's desk. The pieces click into place. The violence in Chester's Mill isn't random, it is centralized. Rennie didn't just order these deaths. He participated. The realization is terrifying. They are trapped in a fishbowl with a shark that controls the water supply. Simultaneously, we witness the absolute nadir of Andy Sanders. The first selectman, a man who has been a puppet for Rennie's machinations, has lost his wife and his will to live. He retreats to the radio station intending to overdose on OxyContin. He is a man hollowed out by grief and weakness, representing the collapse of the town's nominal civil leadership. But before he can swallow the lethal cocktail, he is interrupted, not by an angel, but by a demon in the guise of a chef. Phil's chef, Bushy, the erratic and drug-addled husband of the late Sammy, discovers Andy. What follows is a grotesque parody of salvation. Chef, living in a squalid, paranoia-fueled haze at the station, offers Andy a different kind of release, crystal meth. He frames it in religious delirium, calling it the skin of the apple from the Garden of Eden, a medicine for melancholy. Andy, desperate for anything to fill the void where his soul used to be, partakes. The transformation is instantaneous and horrifying. The drug scours away his grief and replaces it with a manic, chemical energy. Andy Sanders doesn't die. He is reborn as a meth head, fully inducted into the insanity that lies at the heart of Rennie's operation. Chef reveals the town's dark secret. The meth lab is the body of Christ. The idolatry of the drug trade is complete. In the aftermath of the fire, Julia Shumway refuses to be extinguished. Exhausted, homeless, and traumatized, she engages in a final act of defiance. She takes the last remaining bundle of her newspapers, the truth that Rennie tried to burn, and tacks them to telephone poles up and down Main Street. It is a futile gesture in the grand scheme, perhaps, but symbolically powerful. She is forcing the town to look at the words riot and murders in the morning light. She eventually collapses in the home of Andrea Grinnell, seeking refuge. Her dog Horace, her only remaining family. The narrative shifts to the jail cell beneath the police station, where Dale Barbara, Barbie, waits. He is the designated scapegoat, the man Rennie needs to die to cement his narrative. But the resistance is making its first move. Jackie Wettington and Linda Everett, two officers who have retained their moral compass, execute a daring, high-risk maneuver. They bring Barbie breakfast. The scene is fraught with tension. The station is overrun with kiddie cops, high school delinquents and bullies who have been deputized and given guns. They are unpredictable, fueled by testosterone and the thrill of unchecked authority. One of them, Carter Thibodeau, forces the women to let him inspect the food. He spits in the cereal. Another young officer adds a bloody booger. It is a degrading, juvenile display of dominance. But Linda and Jackie play their parts perfectly, masking their fear with compliance. Barbie, understanding the stakes, eats the defiled food. At the bottom of the bowl, beneath the filth, is a note. It is a lifeline. Try to make it until tomorrow night. He eats the note, internalizing the hope. The psychological chess match culminates in an interrogation scene between Barbie and Big Jim. Rennie arrives looking tailored but unwell, the physical toll of his villainy showing in his sallow skin. He threatens Barbie with waterboarding, seeking a confession to wrap up his political theater. Barbie, however, is a veteran. He recognizes Rennie's type, the petty tyrant, the warlord. He counters with a bluff, claiming he knows the location of a duplicate file that exposes Rennie's meth operation. It is a high-stakes gamble. Barbie claims the file was passed from Brenda Perkins to Julia Shumway, and although the copy meant for Julia was destroyed in the fire, he insists another exists. Rennie is shaken. His paranoia, always his driving force, is weaponized against him. He cannot risk torturing Barbie and having him scream the truth about the meth lab for the other officers to hear. Rennie retreats, giving Barbie a 48-hour deadline before a public execution. It is a reprieve, bought with a lie, but it keeps the game alive. As the sun rises on a new day under the dome, the stakes have escalated dramatically. The initial shock of the entrapment has given way to a brutal struggle for control. We have moved beyond a survival story into a political thriller and a horror story of human nature. The town has bifurcated completely. On one side, the chaotic evil of Big Jim, the drug-fueled madness of Chef and Andy, and the violent nihilism of the deputized youth. On the other, a fragile resistance, a doctor, a disgraced soldier, a journalist, and a few good cops. The text explores the rapid erosion of civilization. It asks how quickly a community can turn on itself when the lights go out and the laws are suspended. The answer, terrifyingly, is immediately. The institutions we trust, the hospital, the police, the church, are only as good as the people running them, and under the pressure of the dome, the worst people have risen to the top like cream. We see the theme of addiction weaving through the narrative. Not just Andy's chemical addiction, but Rennie's addiction to power, Sammy's addiction to the release of death, and the town's addiction to the security promised by a strongman. The dome acts as a pressure cooker, accelerating these tendencies, stripping away the polite fictions of small-town life, to reveal the raw, ugly nerves beneath. The imagery of the ashes is potent. The newspaper is ash. The careers of the good officers are ash. The innocence of the town's children is ash. But in the funeral home, amidst the dead, and in the jail cell, amidst the spit and degradation, embers of resistance are glowing. Rusty's discovery of the baseball marks and Barbie's defiant bluff prove that while Rennie controls the perimeter, he does not yet control the truth. This section of the story is a study in despair and resilience. It shows us that even when the sky is sealed off and the air is turning to poison, the human capacity for both immense cruelty and stubborn hope remains infinite. The battle lines are drawn, and the fire on Main Street was just the opening salvo. The real war for the soul of Chester's Mill has just begun. The dead are piling up in the Bowie funeral home, but the living have not yet surrendered. Inside the dome, there is nowhere to run, which means the only way out is through. And for Barbie, staring at the ceiling of his cell, the only option left is to turn adversity into advantage, to wait and to survive one more night in the pressure cooker. The box on Black Ridge. The morning sun over Chester's Mill rises not with the clarity of a crisp New England October, but through a haze of stagnation. It is the morning after the missile strike, a day where the air hangs heavy, trapped and recycled, smelling of sulfur, ozone, and the creeping rot of a town cut off from the world. We find ourselves in the deceptive quiet of the Everett household, where the veil of normalcy is being stretched to its breaking point. Rusty Everett and his wife Linda reunite on the front steps, but this is no standard domestic greeting. The embrace between them is desperate, described as a drowner's grip. It is the physical manifestation of people clinging to wreckage in a storm. Linda, playing a dangerous double game as a police officer under the thumb of the town's dictator, has returned from the station, her survival instinct warring with her exhaustion. The children, the little Jays, are regressing, their light cotton nightgowns out of sync with the season, their behavior manic and fragile. There is a profound psychological toll visible here. The children sense the shifting atmospheric pressure of the town's mood. They speak of Halloween coming early, a child's intuitive way of processing the grotesque surrealism that has overtaken their lives. They are not just reacting to the dome, but to the suffocating authority descending upon the town. Rusty and Linda know that the town's selectman, Big Jim Rennie, is framing the outsider Dale Barbara for murders Rennie himself orchestrated, and they must navigate this lie to survive. They are forced into the classic dilemma of the resistance fighter, appearing to collaborate to protect the vulnerable, while secretly plotting a rebellion that seems increasingly impossible. Meanwhile, in a quieter, more primal corner of the town, we see the dome's effects through the eyes of Horace the corgi. Animals in Stephen King's universe often serve as conduits for the supernatural, sensing shifts in reality that humans ignore. Horace, driven by the gluttonous opportunism of his breed, is foraging for people food scraps. But in his hunt for popcorn under Andrea Grinnell's couch, he stumbles upon something far more significant than a snack. He stands unknowingly upon the Vader file, a dossier containing the evidence of Rennie's criminal enterprises. It is a moment of supreme irony. The truth that could liberate the town lies literally beneath the nose of a drug-addicted select woman and a hungry dog, hidden in the mundane detritus of a living room. But Horace senses something else too. He hears dead voices. The dome has thinned the membrane between the living and the dead, and the ghosts are becoming restless, clamoring for attention in a vacuum where the air is stale and the future is shrinking. The narrative shifts to the center of the spider's web. Big Jim Rennie, the architect of the town's misery, sits in his study. We must understand Rennie not merely as a villain, but as a study in malignant narcissism reinforced by religious delusion. He believes the dome is not a curse, but a divine mandate, a terrarium given to him by God to rule. He is consolidating his power with the ruthless efficiency of a dictator who knows no one is coming to stop him. He has hired thugs like Carter Thibodeau as bodyguards and is systematically purging the police force of dissenters, firing the capable Jackie Wettington to replace her with loyalist children who treat firearms like toys. Rennie receives a call from Colonel Cox, the military commander outside the dome. This conversation highlights the absolute disconnect between the two worlds. Cox, representing the sanity and law of the United States, threatens Rennie with prison and exposure. Rennie, the king of the fishbowl, simply laughs. He knows that as long as the barrier holds, the laws of the outside world are fairy tales. His rejection of Cox is total. He is betting everything on the dome remaining forever. However, there is a crack in Rennie's armor, his physical heart. He suffers from arrhythmia, a frantic, skittering beat that mirrors the chaotic state of the town. It serves as a biological ticking clock, a reminder that even self-appointed gods are housed in dying meat. While Rennie builds his police state, the town's actual decay is personified in his son, Junior Rennie. Junior is unraveling. His brain is being consumed by a tumor, likely accelerated or triggered by the dome's environment. He wanders the streets in pajama pants, speaking in a terrifying rhythmic gibberish, gulfreds, and no gooby. This linguistic breakdown is horror in its purest form. It signifies the loss of the self. When Officer Henry Morrison finds him, Junior is violent and hallucinating, trapped in a loop of his own murderous memories. The town is rotting from the head down, the sickness of the father manifesting as a literal cancer in the son. But amidst this decay, there is a drive for truth. Rusty Everett, accompanied by the smart kids, Joe, Norrie, and Benny, and the resourceful Romy Burpee, embarks on a mission to Black Ridge. They believe they have located the source of the dome, a signal generator that is emitting radiation. This expedition takes on the quality of a fever dream. The air is thick with the smell of dead animals that have committed suicide against the invisible barrier. Rusty's preparations for the radiation are absurd yet heroic. He fashions a suit from lead roofing sheets, catches shin guards, and a lead-lined apron. He looks ridiculous, a Frankenstein's monster of scrap metal, but the humor is undercut by the lethal reality of their situation. As they ascend the ridge, the group begins to suffer from the same neurological distortions that afflict the town. They hallucinate. Rusty sees a Halloween dummy with a stovepipe hat and a shirt that reads, "Play that dead band song," a nonsensical phrase that feels like a coded message from the afterlife. This vision of a burning scarecrow is a psychic defense mechanism, the human brain trying to interpret a signal that is fundamentally alien. The closer they get to the source, the more reality bends. It suggests that the dome acts not just on the physical world, but on the neural pathways of those trapped inside. When Rusty finally reaches the summit of Black Ridge, alone in his heavy lead armor, he finds the object. It is not a military machine or a towering obelisk. It is small, banal, a dark grey box, no larger than a household gadget with a hooded lens. The contrast between the colossal scale of the dome and the insignificance of this device is jarring. It speaks to a technology so advanced that it requires no size to contain its power. When Rusty touches the box, the truth of their situation is revealed in a flash of telepathic contact. He does not see generals or scientists. He sees geometric shapes, leatherheads, entities that are observing the town with the detached amusement of children burning ants with a magnifying glass. They are laughing. This is the crucial, horrifying insight of the law. The dome is not a test, nor a punishment, nor a government conspiracy. It is a game. The people of Chester's Mill are toys in a cosmic nursery. The box is an alien console, and the suffering of the town is merely entertainment for entities that cannot even comprehend human pain. The box defends itself. When Rusty lays the lead apron over it, the metal doesn't just melt. It catches fire and disintegrates into nothingness. Yet the box remains cool to the touch. It is physically there, yet operating on laws of physics that supersede our own. Rusty realizes the futility of physical force against such a thing. He is holding the lock to their prison, but the key is in a hand too massive to see. As Rusty retreats, shaken by the revelation of their cosmic insignificance, the tangible world deals the town another devastating blow. A roar splits the sky, louder than the previous missile strikes. High above, near the boundary of the dome, a fireball erupts. It is Air Island Flight 179. In a tragic error of navigation, the autopilot drove a fully loaded 767 directly into the invisible wall at cruising speed. The description of the crash is harrowing in its clarity. It is not a battle, it is a massacre of the unaware. Rusty watches as the debris rains down, the burning engines, the blue airline seats with passengers still strapped into them, the tail section bearing the green shamrock. The plane crashes into the woods of the TR-90, igniting a massive fire. For the people of Chester's Mill, this is the tipping point. Until now, there was a lingering denial, a hope that this was a mistake that could be fixed. The sight of 300 people turning into a smear of fire and metal on the invisible wall kills that hope. The psychological shift in the town is instantaneous. Denial gives way to a terrified acceptance, and acceptance breeds a craving for authority. This is the moment Big Jim Rennie has been waiting for. A frightened population is a compliant population. As the smoke from the crash mingles with the stagnant air of the dome, the citizens begin to don blue armbands. It is a subtle, creeping fascism. They are marking themselves as loyalists, trading their freedom for the illusion of safety provided by the police force. The blue armband becomes the symbol of the new order, a visual representation of the town turning against itself, identifying the us against the them. At the local radio station, the collapse of sanity takes a different drug-fueled form. Andy Sanders, the disgraced selectman, and the chef, a meth-cooking survivalist, sit watching the smoke rise. They are high on crystal meth, their minds twisting the tragedy into religious prophecy. To them, the plane crash is the star Wormwood from the Book of Revelation, falling to earth to poison the waters. This is the other side of the coin to Rennie's cold calculation, hot, manic fanaticism. They are stockpiling automatic weapons and grenades, preparing for an apocalypse they believe they are ordained to fight. Andy, desperate for connection after the death of his wife, latches onto the chef's madness, finding comfort in the idea that they are Christian soldiers rather than junkies in a cage. In the midst of this darkening spiral, there are small, fragile threads of resistance. Jackie Wettington, having been fired, does not retreat. She recruits the town's Reverend Piper Libby and the librarian, creating a cell of homegrown terrorists to oppose Rennie. They make contact with the outside world, learning that the military wants them to break Dale Barbara out of jail. It is a glimmer of strategy in a chaotic landscape, and in the jail cell deep beneath the police station, Dale Barbara waits. He is beaten and bruised, a prisoner of the new regime. Rose Twitchell, the owner of the local diner, defies orders to bring him food, a toasted BLT, a small gesture of humanity that feels monumental in the face of the growing darkness. Barbie knows the stakes. He knows the town is sliding into a dictatorship fueled by fear and opportunism. He sends a message to Jackie, urging the resistance to act. The narrative closes on this precipice. The sun is setting on a town that has fundamentally changed. The discovery of the alien box has reframed their existence as a cruel joke, while the plane crash has solidified their isolation. The smoke in the sky acts as a shroud. The Leatherheads are watching from above. Big Jim Rennie is watching from the town hall, and the people of Chester's Mill are caught in between, binding blue rags to their arms and waiting for the dark. The dome is no longer just a barrier. It is a pressure cooker, and the heat is rising. The horror is no longer just what is happening to them, but what they are becoming because of it. The monsters are real, but the ones wearing human faces are the ones to fear. Shadows under the pink moon. The air in Chester's Mill is growing stale, not just with the physical reality of the dome, but with the psychological rot of a town turning in on itself. We find ourselves in a moment of deceptive calm, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that precedes a thunderclap. It is a time of waiting, of watching screens, and of the slow, grinding machinery of tyranny beginning to strip away the gears of democracy. Inside Sweetbriar Rose, the mood is one of besieged camaraderie. Rose Twitchell, the heart of this establishment, is serving leftovers, potato salad and coffee, while the television flickers with the only connection to the outside world. Here, we see the forming of a nucleus, a small cluster of sanity in a world going mad. Jackie Wettington, Ernie Calvert, and Julia Shumway gather not just for food, but for the validation of their own reality. This is a crucial psychological defense mechanism in isolated groups when the dominant narrative, in this case Big Jim Rennie's narrative, becomes insane. The sane must huddle together just to prove they still exist. On the screen, the disconnect between the inside and the outside is stark. Colonel James Cox, the military face of the crisis, addresses the media with a polished professionalism that feels alien to the dusty, desperate reality of the mill. He announces Visitors' Day, a concept that sounds benevolent but carries a cruel undercurrent. It treats the trapped townsfolk like inmates in a zoo, allowed a few hours of interaction through the glass. Cox is trying to manage a crisis. He speaks of radiation fears and safety zones, admitting that the dome is dangerous to those with implants, a subtle reminder of the invisible, lethal energies at play. But the real war is the information war. Cox, in a move of calculated political maneuvering, publicly undermines the local smear campaign against Dale Barbara. He vouches for Barbie, calling him a decorated officer and dismantling the serial killer narrative Rennie has been spinning. It's a moment of vindication for our small group at Sweetbriar. But in the closed ecosystem of the dome, truth is often less powerful than the man holding the keys to the jail. It highlights the terrifying duality of their existence. The truth is known to the world, yet locally, a lie backed by a badge and a gun is the only law that matters. Down in the holding cells, we see the immediate toxic fallout of this propaganda. Manuel Ortega, once a mild-mannered farmhand, has been transformed by grief and fear into a vessel of rage. This is a terrifying glimpse into mob psychology. Manuel isn't a bad man by nature, but the trauma of the dome and the loss of the Dinsmore girl have created a vacuum that Rennie's lies have filled. He screams at Barbie through the bars, his face twisted with the need for a scapegoat. It's a chilling reminder that in times of crisis, people don't always look for the truth. They look for someone to blame. Barbie, sitting calmly on his bunk, understands the precariousness of his life. He knows that logic cannot penetrate the armor of radicalized grief. He is one word away from execution, held in check only by the thin veneer of procedure that Rennie still finds useful to maintain. Meanwhile, the narrative shifts to the hospital, where the physical and moral decay of the town's leadership is on full display. Rusty Everett, the physician's assistant who has been thrust into the role of the town's moral compass, is trying to save the very people destroying the town. He examines Junior Rennie, and here we see the biological root of the madness. Junior isn't just a thug, he is a broken biological machine. The diagnosis of papilledema points to a massive brain tumor, the pressure of which is driving his erratic, violent behavior. It adds a layer of tragic inevitability to Junior's actions. He is a monster made, not just born, his brain betraying him as surely as the dome has betrayed the town. But the true heart of darkness resides down the hall in room 19. Big Jim Rennie is holding court, using his hospital room as a command center. When Rusty confronts him, we witness a collision between two fundamentally different worldviews, the empirical and the narcissistic. Rusty attempts to use logic and medical leverage, threatening to withhold heart medication if Jim doesn't step down. It is a noble, desperate gambit, but it relies on the assumption that Big Jim cares about his own health more than his power. Rusty underestimates the sheer, malevolent ego of the man. Big Jim views himself through a messianic lens, twisting scripture to justify his actions. When God closes a door, he opens a window, he says, a platitude turned into a weapon. He doesn't see himself as a corrupt politician. He sees himself as a suffering savior, carrying the cross for the town. This delusion renders him immune to blackmail. When Rusty pushes too hard, accusing Rennie of the murders of Lester Coggins and Brenda Perkins, he crosses a line. He strips away the politician's mask, and what is left is the brute. The violence that follows is intimate and gruesome. It isn't a sterile arrest. It's a schoolyard beatdown escalated to torture. Carter Thibodeau and Freddie Denton, Rennie's enforcers, emerge from the bathroom like jackals. The scene where Big Jim crushes Rusty's hand under his heel is symbolic of the entire situation under the dome. the heavy, crushing weight of authority destroying the hands that try to heal. Rennie enjoys it. That is the terrifying insight. Cruelty is not just a means to an end for him. It is a source of vitality. He breaks Rusty's fingers one by one, dismantling the man's ability to practice medicine, effectively neutering a rival while signaling that the old rules of civilization are suspended. As Rusty is dragged away to join Barbie in the cells, the scope of the disaster widens. The town is fracturing into pockets of resistance and pockets of madness. Out at the radio station WCIK, a different kind of insanity is taking root. This is not the cold, calculating narcissism of Big Jim, but the hot, chaotic fire of drug-induced religious mania. Phil Bushy, now calling himself Chef, and Andy Sanders, a broken man rebuilding himself with crystal meth and scripture, have armed themselves against the world. When Rennie's cronies come to commandeer the propane, they are met not with negotiation, but with AK-47 fire. This standoff represents a wild card in the deck. Rennie can control the police, he can manipulate the press, but he cannot predict the actions of heavily armed addicts who believe they are soldiers in the army of God. Andy Sanders, once a pill-pushing selectman, has found a terrifying new purpose. The drugs have stripped away his fear and replaced it with a hallucinated clarity. They view the dome not as a tragedy, but as star wormwood, a biblical apocalypse that justifies any action. They send Rennie's men packing, declaring the radio station holy ground. It creates a volatile third faction in the town's power struggle, the erratic, explosive element that defies the rigid control Rennie seeks. As night falls, the true resistance begins to coalesce, not with guns, but with whispers. The meeting at the Congo parsonage brings together the disparate threads of hope. The teenage skateboarders, the newspaper woman, the disgraced cops, and the shopkeepers. It is a motley crew, the kind of ragtag fellowship often found in King's works, where the weak and the marginalized find strength in unity. Here the children, Joe McClatchy, Norrie Calvert, and Benny, become the keepers of the most dangerous secret. They reveal the existence of the box on Black Ridge, the generator of the dome. This introduction of the sci-fi element grounds the supernatural horror in physical reality. It gives the resistance a tangible objective. They aren't just fighting a dictator, they are fighting the technology of the barrier itself. The plan they hatch is born of desperation. They intend to break Barbie and Rusty out of jail during the distraction of the town meeting. It is a classic heist setup, but layered with the dread that if they fail, there is no appeal, no higher court. They are gambling with their lives. The ingenuity of the plan lies in using the enemy's ignorance against them. Joe suggests using the Geiger counter to trick Rennie's forces into believing the ridge is radioactive. It's a brilliant inversion, using the fear of the invisible to protect the only thing that matters. As the meeting adjourns, we are left with a sense of the stakes. Linda Everett, terrified but resolute, prepares to walk into the lion's den. These are ordinary people forced to become revolutionaries because the social contract has been shredded. The narrative closes with a shift to the domestic, yet deeply significant scene at Andrea Grinnell's house. Here, Horace the Corgi, a silent observer in this human drama, plays a pivotal role. Animals in this story often serve as conduits for truth, uncorrupted by the politics of men. Horace delivers the Vader file, the evidence Brenda Perkins died trying to hide, to Andrea. Andrea, struggling through withdrawal, opens the envelope. It is a Pandora's box of Rennie's secrets. This discovery changes the landscape of the conflict. It transforms rumors into evidence. It is the smoking gun that has been missing since the dome came down. We end under the light of a pink moon, a grotesque and beautiful anomaly caused by the pollution trapped within the sphere. The imagery is potent, a stained, bloody light bathing a town that has lost its innocence. The atmosphere is thick with the promise of violence. The pieces are set. The tyrant is confident in his control, the madmen are armed in their fortress, the resistance is poised to strike, and the truth is sitting in the lap of a recovering addict. The dome has acted as a crucible, burning away the impurities of polite society to reveal the raw iron of human nature underneath. As the town sleeps under that bruised sky, we know that the next day will not bring liberation, but a collision. The pressure is rising, and something or someone is about to break. This is the calm before the ultimate storm, where the battle for the soul of Chester's Mill will finally move from the shadows into the unforgiving light of the pink moon, the breaking point of Chester's Mill. The air inside the dome has gone stale. It is late October in Maine, a time that should be crisp and smelling of dried leaves and wood smoke. But inside the invisible barrier that has severed Chester's Mill from the rest of the world, the atmosphere is stagnant, recycling the exhaust of panic and the slow rot of a dying town. We begin in the early hours of the morning where the silence is heavy but not empty. It is a silence waiting to be broken. Andrea Grinnell, the town's third selectman, sits in the quiet of a house that isn't hers, listening to gospel music. There is a profound irony here. Andrea, a woman known for her addiction, for the haze of prescription pills that usually clouded her judgment, is now perhaps the most lucid person in town. The withdrawal has stripped her raw, but it has also given her a terrifying clarity. She speaks to Julia Shumway about the nature of pain, proposing a psychological theory that feels all too relevant. The body and the mind are co-conspirators in addiction. If the brain wants the numbness of drugs, the body will manufacture pain to justify it. But then she expands this metaphor to the macrocosm of the town itself. Chester's Mill is a body. It is hurting. And Big Jim Rennie is the brain, feeding it poison, creating pain to justify his own control. This is the state of play as we approach the end. Andrea is preparing for a confrontation. She possesses the Vader file, a dossier compiled by the late Brenda Perkins and her husband, detailing Big Jim's laundry list of crimes. It is the smoking gun that could shatter Rennie's carefully constructed theocracy. Andrea arms herself not just with truth, but with a .38 pistol. She checks the cylinder, leaving the first chamber empty. A safety measure for a woman who knows that if she has to shoot, she has already lost something of her soul. She believes she got sober for a reason, to shoot straight. It is a grim purpose. But in a town under a dome, survival often wears the mask of violence. While Andrea finds clarity, Junior Rennie is descending into a biological and psychological hell. He sits in his hospital room, watching a bizarre pink moon rise over the blackened smudge of the barrier. Junior is dying, though he doesn't fully understand the mechanism yet. The headaches that have plagued him are evolving. There is a dark keyhole shape eating away his vision, a physical manifestation of the tunnel vision that has always defined his morality. He realizes, with a logic that makes perfect sense only to the insane, that he is suffering from thallium poisoning. He deduces that Dale Barbara, Barbie, coated his dog tags with the poison. It is a paranoid delusion, of course, but to Junior, it is revelation. We see the terrifying shift in Junior's psyche here. The rage he felt on Dome Day, the brute physical anger that led him to murder, has been replaced by a silken fury. This is far more dangerous. It is a cold, clarifying madness. He hallucinates vividly, the doctor and nurse engaged in grotesque sexual acts, surrounded by a poison-green aura, his dead victims, Angie McCain and Dodie Sanders, dancing across the lawn in rotting flesh, chanting obscene cheers. These hallucinations are not just random firings of a dying brain, they are projections of his guilt and his warped sexuality. He resolves to kill Barbie, then his father. Then he plans to kidnap the Appleton children, believing he can save them in a dark pantry, a twisted echo of a protective older brother. Junior has become the wolf, a predator roaming the sheep pen of Chester's Mill. The psychological disintegration of the town isn't limited to the villains. The despair is contagious. We witness the discovery of Will and Lois Freeman, a couple who seem to have it all: money, a generator, comfort. They are found in their hot tub, plastic bags cinched over their heads, dead by their own hands. It is a tableau of modern hopelessness. They didn't wait for the water to run out or the air to turn completely toxic. They checked out early. Henrietta Clavard, the neighbor who finds them, calls them cowards. It's a harsh judgment, but it reflects the hardening of the survivors. Suicide in this pressure cooker is viewed as a betrayal of the collective struggle. The contagion spreads to the Dinsmore farm, where Shelley Dinsmore shoots herself in her kitchen. The dome does not just trap people physically, it reflects their own hopelessness back at them until they break. Contrast this despair with the morning routine of Big Jim Rennie. While his son rots and his constituents kill themselves, Big Jim eats a massive breakfast of fried eggs and sausage, reveling in his power. He is the embodiment of gluttony and narcissism. He dismisses the suicides with a joke about them eating breakfast in hell. Rennie is high on control. He plans to seize the town's propane supply, using it as leverage to play the savior. He frames his enemies, Barbie, the druggist, Andy Sanders, the losers, as part of a grand conspiracy. He is a master manipulator, rewriting the narrative of reality to suit his needs. He learns from a phone call with the military outside the dome that there is radiation detection, a threat he dismisses, but one that foreshadows the escalating stakes. He orders his private army to seize the propane station at high noon, styling himself as the law in a lawless land. But resistance is moving in the shadows. We see the Dumbledore's army of Chester's Mill, a ragtag group of teenagers, old men and determined women. Rose, the owner of the Sweetbriar Rose, drives the getaway van. The kids, Norrie and Joe, are involved in dangerous logistics. There is a heartbreaking innocence to their rebellion. Norrie rides her skateboard while waiting for her grandfather to hotwire a van, a moment of childhood joy snatched from the jaws of catastrophe. They are preparing to break Barbie and Rusty out of jail. It is a desperate plan, reliant on the distraction of a town meeting Rennie has called. We must pause to look at Ollie Dinsmore, the surviving son of the suicide victim Shelley. He sits by the dome, throwing rocks at the invisible wall. Bonk. Silence. Bonk. Silence. This repetitive action is a study in grief and futility. He speaks to a young soldier on the other side, separated by mere inches and an infinite divide. The soldier is just a boy himself following orders. Ollie is a boy whose world has ended. They touch hands through the barrier, a connection that is physically impossible, but emotionally devastating. It highlights the arbitrary cruelty of the dome. It separates the living from the dead, the free from the damned, with no rhyme or reason. The sun begins to set, and the town converges on the town hall. It is stiflingly hot, the air foul with the stench of the dying Prestile stream. This meeting is the stage for Rennie's coronation. He has the police force, now mostly his thugs, lining the walls. He has the pulpit. He launches into a speech that is a masterclass in demagoguery. He claims the dome is a government experiment, that Barbie is a covert operative, that the town is being tested. It is the big lie technique. Tell a lie so massive and confident that people believe it simply because they cannot imagine someone fabricating something so audacious. He whips the crowd into a frenzy, turning them into a mob baying for blood. He promises a firing squad for Barbie, but the narrative is interrupted. Andrea Grinnell, in a bright red dress that serves as a visual scream against the drab fear of the town, stands up. She is the glitch in Rennie's matrix. She speaks with the authority of someone who has nothing left to lose. She calls out the lie. She produces the envelope. For a moment, the spell breaks. The town sees the cracks in Rennie's armor. And then, tragedy strikes. It is not a grand battle, but a fumble of nerves. Andrea, weakened by withdrawal and stress, drops her bag. The gun slides out. In the hypertense atmosphere, where fear is the primary currency, a gun is a signal for chaos. A child, innocent and observant, points it out. Panic erupts. Mel Searles, one of Rennie's jumpy new deputies, fires. He misses Andrea, but strikes Carolyn Sturgis, the guardian of the orphaned Appleton children. The violence is sudden and grotesque. Carolyn is killed instantly in front of the children she swore to protect. The town hall dissolves into a stampede. It is a microcosm of society's collapse. In the face of sudden violence, the collective organism panics and tramples itself. Carter Thibodeau, Rennie's ruthless enforcer, seizes the moment. He shoots Andrea Grinnell, ending her threat, and steals the Vader file in the confusion. It is a chaotic, bloody mess that leaves Rennie shaken but still standing, his opposition seemingly decapitated in a matter of seconds. While the town tears itself apart, a quieter, more intimate horror unfolds at the police station. Junior Rennie has arrived. He is fully lost to his psychosis now. He enters the station, where his former colleagues, Stacey Moggin, Roop Libby, Mickey Wardlaw, try to stop him. Junior doesn't see them as people anymore. They are obstacles in a video game he is playing in his rotting brain. He guns them down with terrifying efficiency. There is no hesitation, no remorse. He is cleaning house. The description of the violence is stark. These are not cinematic deaths, but brutal, messy executions. Junior descends the stairs to the holding cells, the coop. He is bleeding from his eyes, his face paralyzed on one side, a walking corpse fueled by hate. He comes for Barbie. This confrontation is the psychological climax of the sequence. Barbie is trapped. He has no gun, nowhere to run. Rusty, his cellmate, is paralyzed with fear, hoping Junior will ignore him. Junior is taunting them, his speech slurred, his vision fracturing into multiple images. He is the boogeyman made flesh. But Barbie does not beg. He realizes that in the face of a madman, logic is useless and pleading is pathetic. He chooses the only weapon left to a condemned man, mockery. Barbie laughs. He laughs at the absurdity of death, at the ruin of Junior's face. He taunts Junior about his sexual inadequacies, about the woman Junior murdered. It is a high-stakes gamble. Barbie is trying to provoke Junior into a blind rage, hoping the boy's physical deterioration will make him miss. Junior fires wildly. Bullets chip the brick, shatter the toilet, graze Barbie's skin. The small cell becomes a kill box filled with ricochets and water spraying from the broken plumbing. Barbie is dancing with death, scrambling on the floor, hurling insults. "You shoot like woodchucks do algebra." It is frantic, terrified courage. Just as Junior prepares the final execution shot, the cavalry arrives. But it isn't a SWAT team. It's Jackie Wettington and Romy Burpee, the resistance. They descend into the smoke-filled basement. They don't offer warnings. They don't try to arrest the monster. Jackie puts 2 bullets into Junior's back. The death of Junior Rennie is pathetic and small. He slides to the floor, his face pressed against the bars, looking like a Japanese death mask. The tragedy of Junior is complete. A boy poisoned by his father's toxicity, both metaphorical and literal, dead on the floor of a jail cell. The aftermath is a blur of adrenaline. The resistance frees Barbie and Rusty. They encounter the remaining Rennie loyalists upstairs. But the dynamic has shifted. Romy, armed with a shotgun, cowers the bullies. They lock the bad cops in the very cells that held the innocent men. It is a moment of grim satisfaction, but there is no time to celebrate. As they flee the station in the stolen van, the town is still reeling. The survivors of the town hall massacre are wandering the streets in shock. The air is still poisonous. The dome still looms over everything. They have won a battle, surviving the night, but the war for Chester's Mill is far from over. As they drive toward the darkness of Black Ridge, escaping the immediate grasp of Big Jim Rennie, they are driving into an uncertain future. The script flips from political thriller to survival horror to a road movie in the span of an hour. The psychological toll of these events cannot be overstated. We have seen the breakdown of order, the contagion of suicide, the weaponization of fear, and the ultimate fragility of the human mind under pressure. Andrea's clarity couldn't save her. Junior's madness destroyed him. Big Jim's hubris has bathed the town in blood. And Barbie, the intended victim, survives not through strength of arms, but through the sheer absurdity of fate and the courage of his friends. The van disappears into the night, leaving the blood-soaked town hall and the corpse-ridden police station behind. Chester's Mill is breaking. The centre cannot hold. And as the survivors look up, they see the pink stars through the barrier, beautiful and indifferent to the suffering below. The nightmare is reaching its crescendo. The magnifying glass. The nightmare under the dome had shifted its frequency. It was no longer just a physical cage. It was becoming a psychic amplifier. We begin out on the edge of the perimeter, where the motley resistance crew, Barbie, Rusty, Romy, and the others, stared into the darkness. But it wasn't dark. Not really. Separating them from the safety of the McCoy farm was a phenomenon that defied earthly physics, a glowing band of radiation. To Barbie, it looked like the dial of a massive watch, glowing with a bioluminescent malice. To the others, it was simply a wall of poison. They found a bear carcass rotting near a telephone pole, illuminated by this sickly pink light. But here is the first crack in the logic of the dome, a detail that Rusty, with his medical mind, latched onto immediately. The bear was dead. Suicide, perhaps, or simply the biological failure of a large mammal trapped in a radiation field. But the squirrels, the birds, they were fine. It was a discrepancy that suggested a design. This wasn't just fallout. It was a filtration system, a belt and suspenders approach to containment. The dead animals were a warning for the daylight hours, and the glowing radiation belt was a neon keep-out sign for the night. It suggests that the intelligence behind the dome understands human psychology, or at least the psychology of fear. They had to cross it. There was no other choice. And this crossing wasn't just physical, it was a hallucinogenic rite of passage. As they drove the armored van into the light, the dome reached into their minds. It didn't just burn the body, it ignited the subconscious. For Jackie Wettington, the radiation triggered an apocalyptic vision. She saw the world on fire, a man with a white cross, people screaming as they burned. It was a premonition of religious fanaticism, perhaps, or a manifestation of the sheer existential dread of their situation. For Ernie, the experience was seductively different. He wasn't seeing fire. He was seeing his wife on their honeymoon, a vivid, tactile memory of intimacy and lust. It highlights a terrifying aspect of the dome's power. It doesn't distinguish between your worst nightmares and your deepest desires. It simply turns the volume up to maximum. When the van emerged on the other side, trailing a cometary tale of fading light, the occupants were shaken, their realities fractured. They regrouped at the McCoy farmhouse, a place that was quickly becoming the last bastion of sanity in Chester's Mill. But sanity is a relative term when you are staring at an extraterrestrial generator. Julia Shumway and the other women had already been there, and they were weeping. Not out of fear, but out of a profound, crushing realization. They had touched the box, the generator that Rusty had found. And in doing so, they had seen the architects of their misery. Rusty, ever the intuitive soul, bridged the gap between the cosmic and the childhood playground. He recounted a memory of burning ants with a magnifying glass. It's a chilling, perfect metaphor for their existence under the dome. We like to think of contact with alien life as a meeting of minds, a grand exchange of mathematics and philosophy. But what if we are just the ants? What if the intelligence looking down on us isn't malevolent in a strategic sense, but simply bored? Cruelty, after all, is often just a lack of empathy, and to a child with a magnifying glass, the ant has no soul. Barbie needed to see for himself. He approached the box, the pulsing heart of the dome's generator. When he touched it, the feedback loop hit him like a physical blow. He saw them. Leatherheads. High faces, shapes that refused to resolve into Euclidean geometry because the human brain simply lacks the codec to interpret them. But the feeling was unmistakable. They were laughing. It transported Barbie back to a gymnasium in Fallujah, to the smell of sweat and fear, to the moment of torturing prisoners not for information, but for the dark rush of power. He realized with a sinking heart that Rusty was right. These weren't soldiers or scientists. They were children, bullying, cosmic children. The dome wasn't an experiment. It was a toy. And the people of Chester's Mill were the playthings trapped inside, scurrying around for the amusement of entities that viewed them as nothing more than bugs in a jar. While the resistance grappled with the horror of insignificance, the horror of human ego was consolidating its power back in town. Big Jim Rennie sat in the jail cell with the body of his son, Junior. This scene is a masterclass in narcissistic delusion. Rennie looked at his dead son, a boy he had been willing to sacrifice, a boy who had murdered and rampaged, and rewrote the narrative in real time. He told himself he loved Junior. He sang a lullaby. But in the erratic rhythm of his own heart, Rennie was already calculating the political capital of his son's death. Junior became a martyr, a victim of the dangerous Dale Barbara. Carter Thibodeau, the rising enforcer, watched this performance. Carter is a predator, pure and simple, but he's a predator who knows he needs a pack leader. He handed Rennie the Vader file, the evidence of Rennie's drug manufacturing ring, and pledged his loyalty. In that dingy cell, a torch passed. Junior was the biological son, but Carter was the spiritual successor. He was the son Rennie wanted, brutal, efficient, and devoid of the chaotic mental illness that plagued Junior. They moved to the town hall to burn the evidence. The banality of evil was on full display as Rennie gave orders to his puppet police chief Randolph while feeding documents into a wood stove. He spun a tale that Andrea Grinnell, the woman who had exposed him, was a drug-addled lunatic. He planned a visitor's day at the dome's edge, not to comfort the townspeople, but to herd them like cattle, keeping them distracted and exhausted while his goons raided the hospital for propane. Rennie operates on the principle that a tired, scared population is a compliant one. He is the ant who wants to be the king of the anthill, ignoring the magnifying glass burning the sky above him. Back on the ridge, the night offered a brief respite for Barbie and Julia. In the shadow of the alien device, they found a moment of human connection. Julia opened up about her own trauma, a brutal bullying incident in childhood where she was stripped and humiliated by other girls. This story isn't just character background, it's a thematic mirror to the main plot. The girls who tormented Julia, who laughed at her vulnerability, are the human equivalents of the Leatherheads watching the dome. It reinforces the idea that the impulse to dominate, to humiliate the weak, isn't an alien concept. It's universal. It's in the schoolyard, it's in the torture chambers of Iraq, and it's in the dimension beyond the dome. Julia refused to be a victim then, and she refuses to be an ant now. Their intimacy on the ridge, an act of love in the face of annihilation, was a small rebellion against the cold indifference of their captors. But not everyone was finding comfort in connection. The dome's pressure was cracking the minds of the solitary. Andy Sanders, the disgraced selectman, and Chef Bushy, a man rapidly descending into religious psychosis, sat in the dark, armed and high. Chef had fashioned a white cross and strapped grenades to his rifle, convinced he was God's warrior. When reality becomes a nightmare, the mind retreats into fantasy. Chef's fantasy just happened to be armed with high explosives. And then there was the silence of the Dinsmore farm. Young Ollie Dinsmore woke to a cold house. The routine of the farm, the cows, the coffee, was broken. He found his father, Alden, dead in the grandfather's bed, an empty bottle of painkillers and whiskey nearby. This vignette is a devastating grounding wire for the story. Amidst the aliens and the political coups, Ollie's tragedy is quiet and absolute. His father, unable to face the slow strangulation of the dome, checked out, leaving a boy to face the end of the world alone. The smell of stale alcohol and urine, the note on the door, it captures the pathetic, unheroic reality of suicide. Ollie's grief, vomiting into the toilet, realizing he is truly the last one left of his family, adds a layer of sorrow that adrenaline cannot mask. The sun rose on a town that was fracturing. Carter Thibodeau, emboldened by his new status as Rennie's right hand, went hunting. He arrived at Linda Everett's house, looking for the fugitives. The interaction between Carter and Linda serves as a harrowing example of how quickly social contracts dissolve. Carter didn't just want information, he wanted to dominate. He physically tormented Linda, twisting her arm, sexually assaulting her with a grinding, terrifying intimacy in her own kitchen. He knew he could do it. Who would stop him? The police? He was the police. Linda, terrified for the children playing in the backyard and the fugitives she was hiding, had to endure his abuse. She used the only weapon she had left, her wits. She concocted a lie about her husband's whereabouts, delivered with enough vulgarity to make it sound authentic. It worked, but the encounter left a stain. It showed that inside the dome, the monsters aren't just outside the glass. They are wearing badges and standing in your kitchen. As the morning fully broke, the resistance on the ridge made a move. They needed help. Barbie contacted Colonel Cox on the outside. But before help could arrive, there was one more confirmation of their horrific reality. Norrie, one of the teenagers, touched the box. She convulsed, her mind linking with the observers. When she pulled away, weeping, her confirmation was simple and devastating. Bad kids, she called them. They were watching a screen, just as we watch reality TV. They saw the suffering, the fire, the fear, and they didn't care. To them, the tragedy of Chester's Mill was just a show. The episode ends with the thumping rotors of heavy transport helicopters, Chinooks, descending on the outside of the dome. The military was bringing in massive fans, a desperate attempt to mitigate the stale air and the rising heat. But as the dust swirled and the machines touched down, the sense of dread remained. Fans might move the air, but they couldn't blow away the magnifying glass. The ants were still trapped. The sun was getting hotter, and the boys with the burning ray were just getting started. The true horror wasn't the radiation or the lack of resources, it was the realization that their suffering was nothing more than a game. The fire in the fishbowl. The atmosphere in Chester's Mill had curdled. It wasn't just the physical reality of the dome, that invisible, impenetrable barrier that had severed the town from the rest of the world, but the psychological weight of it. On this particular morning, a hazy, yellow-tinted sun rose over a community on the brink of a collective nervous breakdown. It was Visitors' Day, a cruel concession by the military outside, allowing the trapped residents to press their hands against the barrier and mime affection to the relatives standing on free soil. But the air inside was already foul, thick with the particulate matter of a town slowly choking on its own exhaust, the sky turning the color of a bruised peach. Linda Everett, a former officer now operating on pure survival instinct, sensed the shift in the wind before the chaos truly began. There is a primal intuition that kicks in when a trapped animal realizes the cage is about to become a slaughterhouse. Linda, packing her children and the fugitive Thurston Marshall into a van, was guided by this instinct. She wasn't just fleeing the suffocating politics of Big Jim Rennie's police state, she was fleeing a premonition. She navigated the back roads, driven by a paranoia that was merely a heightened state of awareness. narrowly missing a blockade set by Rennie's thugs. They slipped out of the town centre just as the trap began to close, heading for the high ground of Black Ridge, unknowingly putting themselves above the kill zone. Down in the valley, the town was a theatre of the absurd. Big Jim Rennie, the car salesman turned dictator, watched his subjects from the air-conditioned fortress of his Hummer. To him, the citizens trekking toward the dome boundary weren't people, they were cotton-picking rabble, cattle to be managed. His disdain was absolute, a classic symptom of the narcissist who views his stewardship not as a duty of care but as a burden of tolerance. He had dispatched his henchman Carter Thibodeau and a newly minted, dangerously incompetent police force to seize control of the town's last wild card, the drug operation at the radio station. It is in this raid that the tragedy of Chester's Mill transitions from a political thriller into a horror story. The police force, led by the pompous Chief Randolph and the indecisive Freddie Denton, approached the WCIK radio station with the tactical sophistication of children playing war. They were unarmored, arrogant, and fundamentally unprepared for the nihilistic fury waiting for them. Inside the station were Chef Bushy and Andy Sanders, men whose minds had been scoured clean of fear and reason by high-grade methamphetamine. They viewed themselves not as drug cooks, but as soldiers of ecstasy, prepared to wage a holy war against the bitter men coming to take their freedom. The confrontation was a massacre of incompetence against insanity. The raiding party, expecting a simple surrender, walked directly into a buzzsaw of automatic fire. One by one, the untrained deputies were cut down in the tall grass, their dreams of authority ending in blood and confusion. Andy Sanders, the town's former selectman, now completely lost to the drug-induced dream, moved with the eerie calm of a sleepwalker, gunning down his former colleagues. The violence here was intimate and grotesque, a microcosm of the town's civil war. But the true horror wasn't the gunfire. It was the contingency plan. Bushy and Sanders had rigged the station, stockpiled with propane meant for drug manufacturing and rigged with plastic explosives. The facility was effectively a bomb large enough to level a city block. As the firefight turned against them, with Bushy mortally wounded and bleeding into the grass, the two men shared a final, distorted moment of connection. In a gesture that was both a suicide pact and a final act of defiance, they pressed the button on a garage door opener, the detonator. The resulting explosion didn't just destroy the radio station, it tore a hole in the day itself. A fireball of apocalyptic proportions erupted, fueled by thousands of gallons of propane. But in the closed system of the dome, physics behaved differently. There was nowhere for the energy to dissipate. The explosion became a magnifying glass, focusing heat and pressure into a wave of destruction that defied natural law. The sound of the blast was a hammer blow to the entire town, but the silence that followed was worse. It was the intake of breath before a scream. A firestorm, black and towering, began to roll outward from the crater. This wasn't a normal fire, it was a voracious, oxygen-hungry predator. Because the dome allowed almost no air exchange, the fire acted as a colossal vacuum, sucking the breathable atmosphere out of the streets to feed its own combustion. It became a solid wall of flame, hundreds of yards high, marching across the landscape with the inevitability of a tidal wave. In the town hall, Big Jim Rennie and Carter Thibodeau realized too late the magnitude of their error. The hubris of the tyrant is often his undoing, and as the sky turned the color of midnight and the wind began to scream, a wind created by the fire inhaling the town's oxygen, they scrambled for the basement fallout shelter. They were rats scurrying into a hole, abandoning the populace they claimed to protect. Above them, the symbols of their authority, the police station, the town hall, the statue of the town founder, were vaporized in seconds, reduced to ash and molten slag. The fire moved with terrifying speed, flaying the town of Chester's Mill. It roared down Main Street, exploding buildings from the inside out as the heat boiled the air within them. The library, the grocery store, the homes of the wealthy and the poor, all were equal before the flame. The temperature spiked to incinerating levels. It wasn't just burning, it was erasure. History, culture, and lives were being wiped clean, leaving behind only toxic fumes and charred earth. But the true nightmare was unfolding at the border. Hundreds of townspeople had gathered at the dome wall for Visitors' Day, pressing against the barrier to see their loved ones on the other side. Now, that invisible wall became the lid of a coffin. As the firestorm approached, darkening the sky and poisoning the air, panic set in. This is the moment where the human mind snaps. The crowd, trapped between an immovable object and an unstoppable force, devolved into pure terror. Animals fled the woods. Deer, moose, even domestic cattle, charging blindly toward the dome, only to crash against it, breaking their bodies in a desperate bid for freedom that didn't exist. The humans fared no better. They were crushed against the barrier, screaming silently to the horrified onlookers on the other side. The soldiers and families outside could only watch as the aquarium filled with smoke. In a moment of supreme desperation, Henry Morrison, one of the few decent cops left, tried to lead a busload of the weak and infirm through the smoke, hoping to punch through the firewall and find clean air on the other side. It was a valiant, doomed effort. The heat was so intense it melted the tires and imploded the windows. The bus became a furnace on wheels, its passengers incinerated in transit, their hope extinguishing milliseconds before their lives. The fire spared no one in its path. Those who tried to drive were blinded by the smoke, slamming into the invisible walls of the dome at highway speeds, their vehicles crumpling like accordions. The scene at the barrier was a tableau of the damned, hundreds of people, faces pressed to the glass, watching the black wall of death rushing toward them. Some prayed, some screamed, and some, like the dentist Joe Boxer, broke under the strain, choosing a quick bullet over the impending agony. As the fire consumed the southern end of the town, it sucked the remaining oxygen out of the northern quadrant. On Black Ridge, Barbie, Julia Shumway, and the other survivors watched the destruction of their world. But their safety from the flames was an illusion. The fire was dying down, having consumed everything combustible, but it had left something else in its wake. A vacuum. The air was turning into poison, a lethal cocktail of methane, carbon monoxide, and smoke. The terrifying realization hit them. They weren't going to burn. They were going to suffocate. They raced to the northernmost edge of the dome, where the military had set up giant industrial fans on the outside, desperately trying to push clean air through the barrier's semi-permeable membrane. The survivors, choking and gasping, fell to their knees, pressing their faces against the invisible wall, fighting for every molecule of oxygen. Behind them, the ruins of Chester's Mill lay silent and smoking, a graveyard under glass. The political squabbles, the power grabs, the secrets, all of it had been rendered meaningless by the fire. Now, there was only the breathing, and the terrible knowledge that the fishbowl had been shaken and almost everyone inside was floating belly up. The last breaths of Chester's Mill. The firestorm that consumed Chester's Mill has left behind a charred, suffocating graveyard. From a population of 2,000, the inferno has whittled the survivors down to a grim statistic. Fewer than 400 souls remain, clustered mostly in the northeast quadrant, where the flames were less voracious. By the time night fully descends, turning the inside of the dome into a blackened tomb, that number drops to just over 100. And when the sun rises on Saturday, illuminating the soot-stained glass walls of this prison, only 32 people are left alive. It is a portrait of extinction, swift and merciless. Among the debris, survival becomes a game of chance, dictated by location and resources rather than virtue. Take Ollie Dinsmore. As the fire raged, he retreated into the potato cellar of his family's barn, a dank sanctuary that would become his lifeboat. He survived because he remembered the Honda generator and the oxygen tanks his grandfather used. It is a claustrophobic nightmare, buried beneath a mountain of potatoes, the heat pressing in like a physical weight, breathing through a mask while the world above him incinerated. There is a primal, terrifying instinct at play here, the human drive to persist, even when buried alive. Ollie drags himself and his tank through the dirt, a lone boy navigating a hellscape, proving that the will to live is often the most stubborn force in nature. Then there is Sam Vadreau, known to the town as Sloppy Sam. In a twist of supreme irony that Stephen King often favors, the town drunk survives specifically because of his illness. Diagnosed with emphysema, though likely just severe bronchitis, Sam had a stockpile of medical oxygen. While the healthy burned or suffocated, the man with the compromised lungs sat in his oxygen bar, a shack filled with tanks, and simply waited out the apocalypse. He creates a grotesque tableau. An old man pulling a red wagon filled with oxygen tanks through a landscape of ash, navigating by the light of the glow belt, the radioactive-looking luminescence of the dome at night. It highlights the capriciousness of fate under the dome. The strong perish, while the broken endure. Meanwhile, deep beneath the ruins of the town hall, a different kind of suffocation is taking place. Big Jim Rennie and his subordinate Carter Thibodeau are sealed in the fallout shelter. This is a microcosm of Rennie's entire worldview, a small, controlled environment where he is the undisputed king, even if his kingdom is reduced to a sofa and a stockpile of sardines. The psychological tension here is thick enough to cut. They are surviving on a generator that powers an air purifier, but their propane is dwindling. The buzzer that signals a tank change, a harsh mechanical scream, becomes the soundtrack to their demise. Rennie, ever the narcissist, frames their entrapment as a test of faith, viewing himself as the righteous leader whom God will protect. He eats sardines with greasy fingers, lecturing Carter on the bleeding heart liberals and the myth of the sky falling, even as the literal sky has been walled off and poisoned. It is a study in delusion. Rennie cannot accept that his machinations have led to this. He dissociates, snapping at Carter, treating him like a wayward son while secretly despising him. Carter, however, is beginning to see the cracks. The survival watchman in his brain, that subconscious alarm system, is screaming that Rennie is a liability. The dynamic shifts from boss and employee to two rats trapped in a bucket. At the edge of the dome, the main group of survivors, Barbie, Julia Shumway, Rusty Everett, and the remaining civilians, are huddled against the glass. The military on the outside has set up massive industrial fans to blow fresh air through the permeable barrier, but it is a losing battle. They are living in a poison soup of methane and carbon dioxide. The scene is pathetic and horrifying. Humans pressing their faces against the invisible wall, gasping for the thin stream of clean air like fish out of water. The tragedy compounds as the most vulnerable begin to succumb. The elderly Ernie Calvert dies despite the desperate efforts of the group to share the last dregs of oxygen. The death of the innocents follows, as the golden retriever Audrey passes away, followed by the children. It is a slow-motion genocide. The horror here isn't a monster with claws, it's the simple physiology of the human body running out of fuel. The hope that the military might save them with a pencil nuke, a precise tactical strike to crack the dome, is dashed when Colonel Cox delivers the crushing news. The nuke melted down in an accident at the testing site. The outside world is trying, but incompetence and bad luck are conspiring to seal Chester's Mill's fate. Back in the shelter, the inevitable betrayal occurs. Carter, realizing that the math of their oxygen supply doesn't add up for two people, decides to kill Big Jim. It isn't personal, it is the cold calculus of survival. But Carter makes the classic mistake of the decent man confronting a monster. He hesitates. He gives Rennie time to pray. Rennie, a creature of pure instinct and malice, uses that moment. In the dark, a struggle ensues that is brutal and chaotic. Rennie stabs Carter with a butcher knife, disemboweling the young man. The scene is visceral. Rennie, the man with the bad heart, moves with the shocking speed of a cornered predator. After the violence, Rennie stands over the dying boy and delivers a final, chilling lesson. Never give a good politician time to pray. He executes Carter, cementing his status as the true villain of the piece. He is not just a survivor, he is a parasite who feeds on those around him to extend his own existence. But the dome has a way of balancing the scales. Left alone in the dark, Big Jim's reality begins to fracture. The generator fails. He is plunged into absolute blackness, fumbling for a flashlight, for matches, for anything to hold back the dark. The silence is broken by the sound of his own failing heart, and then by voices that shouldn't be there. The psychological breakdown of Big Jim Rennie is a masterclass in guilt manifesting as horror. He begins to hear the people he has wronged: his son Junior, the murdered Brenda Perkins, the betrayed Lester Coggins. In the suffocating dark, the shelter becomes a tomb of ghosts. He feels dead hands grasping at him, hears the whispers of his victims. It is ambiguous whether this is a supernatural occurrence or the firing of a dying, oxygen-starved brain, but the effect is the same. Rennie, the man who demanded absolute control, is reduced to a screaming, terrified animal. He flees the shelter, scrambling up the stairs to the conference room door, but he is too large, too panicked. He gets stuck. The Emperor of Chester's Mill dies not with dignity, but jammed in a doorway, gasping for air that isn't there, hallucinating the touch of the dead. It is a pathetic, lonely end for a man who thought he was chosen by God. Outside, the situation for the remaining survivors is dire. Sunday morning brings a reddish, toxic dawn. The air is hot and still. Ollie Dinsmore is still alive, barely, thanks to the encouragement of Private Ames on the other side of the glass. Their connection is poignant. A soldier and a boy separated by an impenetrable wall, united by the simple imperative to keep breathing. But elsewhere, the group is thinning. Benny Drake dies. Thurston Marshall dies. The grief is exhausted. There is no energy left for mourning, only the mechanical effort of drawing the next breath. Yet, in this landscape of despair, a sliver of hope emerges from the most unlikely source. Sam Verdrow, the drunk who stumbled out of the woods with his wagon of air, reveals something critical. He knows the terrain. He knows where the generator is, the alien device creating the dome. Julia Shumway, feverish but clear-eyed, realizes that pleading with the military is useless. The Leatherheads, the entities controlling the dome, are likely children playing a cosmic video game, and the humans are merely ants in their ant farm. To survive, they don't need to break the glass. They need to get to the console. As the survivors cough and wheeze in the poisoned twilight, staring at the flashing purple light of the box on the ridge, Sam speaks up. He can show them the way. It is a final, desperate gambit. With the town dead, the air turning to poison, and the great politician rotting in his hole, the fate of the few remaining souls rests on a journey into the blackened wasteland, guided by a man who spent his life in a bottle toward the source of their nightmare. Breathing tires and locking boxes. The air in Chester's Mill has turned into a toxic soup, a suffocating blend of soot and diminishing oxygen that marks the final gasps of a town trapped under an impenetrable barrier. It is 7:30 in the morning, but the light is murky, filtered through a dome that has become a tomb. The survivors have gathered, a ragtag collection of the desperate and the dying, huddled near the perimeter where the air is marginally better, though better is a relative term when every breath rattles with rails and fear. We find ourselves witnessing the absolute limit of human endurance. Sam Verdrow, a man whose body is failing but whose spirit has found a late-stage redemption, orchestrates a plan that sounds like madness. It is a testament to the strange ingenuity that arises when death is minutes away. They possess a few crucial items: a van with windows that were sealed against the smoke, and pristine tires filled with clean air from before the firestorm. It is a grotesque image, distinctively King-esque in its blend of the mundane and the horrific, survival depending on sucking the air out of rubber tires like divers sharing a dwindling tank. Barbie, Julia Shumway, and Sam prepare to make a run for the source of the dome, the generator box. This isn't just a physical journey, it is a psychological threshold. They are leaving the collective safety of the group to confront the unknown. As they drive into the poisoned orchard, the van bucking over rough terrain, the sensory experience is overwhelming. The air outside is unbreathable, tasting of dead fish and charcoal. Inside, they are on borrowed time. Sam, coughing up blood, drives with the reckless abandon of a man who knows he won't be making the return trip. He is the ferryman here, delivering the heroes to their confrontation. When they reach the flashbox, the device generating the barrier, the desperation peaks. Barbie punctures the tires, using a hollow spindle as a makeshift straw. It's a visceral, claustrophobic moment, Julia and Barbie trading breaths of rubber-scented oxygen while the world around them chokes. But the physical solution is only a bridge to the metaphysical one. Julia realizes that mechanics won't save them, only an appeal to the captors will. This leads us into a sequence that recontextualizes the entire ordeal of the dome. Julia doesn't just touch the box, she projects her consciousness into a void, a place that is no place. Here, the cosmic horror is revealed not as malice, but as indifference. She encounters the entity responsible, a Leatherhead. It is not a conquering warlord or a demon, but a child, a cosmic infant. The dome is not a weapon of war, it is an ant farm. It is a magnifying glass held by a bored child over a chaotic anthill. The psychological weight of this realization is crushing. All the suffering, the politics, the deaths, they were merely entertainment for a juvenile entity from another dimension. Julia, stripped of her dignity and reduced to her most vulnerable self in this vision, begs. She doesn't appeal to the creature's morality because a child burning ants doesn't understand morality. She appeals to its pity. She screams that they are real, that their little lives matter. The entity, wearing the shifting face of a local girl to make sense of the interaction, offers a chilling verdict. She isn't sorry. She is merely done playing. Wear it home. It'll look like a dress, she says, a cryptic, nonsensical phrase that signifies the casual nature of the gift. The gift is life. The dome rises. The physical release is immediate and euphoric. The barrier lifts like a window blind, and the rushing wind carries the scent of honeysuckle and survival. But the victory is paid for in blood. Sam Verdreau, having delivered his passengers, succumbs to his internal injuries. He dies watching the sky clear, a moment of profound peace after a life of turmoil. The horror of the dome ends not with a bang, but with the return of the mundane, a dog barking, the breeze blowing, and the realization that while humanity is small in the grand scheme of the cosmos, it persists. Chester's Mill is no longer a town. It is a scar on the map of Maine, a blackened testament to the fragility of civilization. The survivors, Barbie, Julia, and the few others who clawed their way out of the poison, are free, but they are not whole. They carry with them the terrible knowledge of what happened in the dark. They know now that the veneer of society is paper-thin. They know that it takes only a few days of isolation for a used car salesman to become a king, and for neighbors to become executioners. The Leatherheads may have put the toy away, bored with their game, but for the ants who survived the magnifying glass, the burns will never truly heal. As they walk away from the ruins, breathing the sweet, unfiltered air of a world that moved on without them, they realize that the physical barrier was the least of their problems. The true prison was the fear, the greed, and the silence that allowed monsters to rise. The dome has lifted. The sky is open again. The nightmare is technically over, but the memories remain. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the fishbowl. If you want to support the channel and explore more of the Stephen King multiverse, please subscribe and check the link below to own the original masterpiece. Until next time, sleep well and watch the sky.